30. The evolution of AUO. The birth of AUO evolves into AUM. By now AUO, absolute unbounded oneness, is ready to make space-time, physical matter, you, me, and begin several experiments in the evolution of consciousness. Each experiment is developed and evolves within a specialized part, memory and computation space, of AUO. We perceive each of these special parts, unique mental spaces within AUO, as separate dimensions, separate realities. There may be dimension within dimension, reality within reality, like a set of Russian matryoshka dolls or perhaps the concentric layers of an onion. For example, our beloved PMR universe is one of a very large group of both physical and non-physical reality subsets, each within its own mind space dimension of the larger digital consciousness. These realities are contained within, as well as derived from and dependent upon, the much larger, more general, less constrained, more degrees of freedom, reality of NPMRN likewise. NPMRN is one of a dozen or so subsets of NPMR. If the use of subscripts is confusing, simply think of the NPMRN as being MEM bears, subsets, or separate portions of NPMR, like neighborhoods, states, or countries represent social, political, and geographical subsets on Earth. The following is a list of some of the subsets of NPMR, NPMR1, NPMR2, NPMR3, NPMRN, NPMRN plus L, NPMRN plus 2, equals NPMRJ. Using subscripts such as NPMRN is a convenient way to refer to some portion, dimension, or neighborhood of NPMR which contains and supports OS, which in turn contains and supports PMR. Using a similar notation, we will sometimes refer to multiple PMRs as the PMRK, where K equals 1, 2, 3. If the Yosabe 250 I my big TOE the evolution of AUO, the birth of Alim. Subscript notation bothers you, just forget about it, it is not that critical to your overall understanding. A general idea of what is intended is all that is necessary. Using our digital simulation analogy, see the aside on dimension at the end of chapter 28 of this book, we can easily envision subroutines within subroutines, partitioned memory MD calculation space that is further subdivided into smaller pieces where inane subsets, such as PMR, of the overall simulation are processed. We can imagine more general realities containing more constrained subrealities, each in their own calculation space, mind space, or dimension. Do not think of a solitary onion or a single set of matryoshka dolls, there are many. For you couch potatoes with digital TV tuners, reality and dimension are somewhat analogous to picture within a pict one ear within a picture, displaying or running multiple TV programs in their own subspace of the larger TV screen simultaneously. However, the consciousness pie is divided up, however many realities may be running as simulations or as subsets of larger simulations, all are connected through, and are a part of, the one source, AUO consciousness. AUO is the foundation of one thing, because everything exists in the relation of AUO to itself. Consciousness is the one, while the many, the great diversity of realities and the entities that populate those realities, are specialized subsets of consciousness within their own thought space or dimension. The process and purpose of subdividing consciousness into both dimension and individuated units of awareness is discussed in sections 3 and 4. When AUO eventually grows up and evolves into an extremely complex and highly ordered set of specialized reality cells performing specialized functions, it becomes an entirely different type of entity. Consequently, we are going to give it a new name, the Absolute Unbounded Manifold, AUM. AUM appears low us to be absolute and unbounded. For that matter, all one I is still an absolute oneness as well, but now also a manifold, one into many, of sequences, patterns, realities, dimensions, and existence. All one I is a more complex, lower entropy manifestation of AUO, no new substance or assumptions are added. At AUM's core is the same basic AUO consciousness energy sporting a more evolved level of awareness, lower entropy, and greater functionality. There is no clear dividing line between A.UO and AUM. The distinction is entirely arbitrary. The extent to which AUO grows up and develops structure, organization, and complex communications, as well as content, meaning, self-awareness, memory, value, and purpose is what allows AUO to emerge. Renamed AUMIL is more a matter of degree than it is a matter. Book 1, Section 2, Chapter 30 I 251. Of developing new fundamental capabilities, evolution, not revolution. Because the awareness, function, ability, and purpose of AUM is so different, more resembling the consciousness we are used to, than the consciousness we call dim awareness, I decided to give it a new name, reminiscent of how we call people people instead of upright naked monkeys with short arms. Think of AUM emerging from AUO as the natural consequence of digital consciousness purposely evolving a highly parallel, multitasking operating system and interactive application software. That concept should not be too difficult to understand. We humans may likewise soon begin to modify our software or firmware, relative to our physical systems, as our ability to apply genetic engineering to ourselves matures and we become better at manipulating the biochemistry of our mechanisms of conscious perception. Human genetic manipulations and psychotropic medications are at their infancy. We haven't seen anything yet, we cannot imagine what is coming. These fields will impact humanity with every bit as much force as the digital revolution in computer and networked communications technology. We live at the dawn of a potentially explosive evolutionary and cultural transition. The pace of change is dramatically accelerating. Ahead lies a unique and powerful potential for an incredibly accelerated progression, regression, or self-destruction. After 250 years of the industrial age comes the genetics engineering, cloning, psychotropic drug, computer networked communications, digital information age, all at once. Oh geez. Get ready. Put on your helmet, batten down the hatches and fasten your seat belts. This baby is lifting off the launch pad. The point is, once a complex system is capable of direct.ly programming itself, developing or modifying its original source code, which includes genetic engineering, the pace of evolution dramatically accelerates. The intellect, aided by the products of its increasing awareness, digital and other technology, replaces random mutation and natural selection as the primary driver. Consequently, evolution accelerates from a very slow-paced process to an ultra-fast one. Exactly how much AUM's evolution accelerated as it gained the tools to become self-directing is unknown. Looking at the evolution of biologic systems, we can foresee processes that would normally take hundreds of thousands of years being compressed into a handful of decades or only a few years through genetic manipulation. Faster evolution may seem like a good idea, but speed is speed whether it is in the positive, low ERS entropy, or negative, raises entropy, direction. 252 I My Big TOE The evolution of AUO, the Berthoff Alim. If the direction turns out to be negative, the question is, has the evolutionary process changed too much too quickly to be turned around before the overall system self-destructs? Wisdom would say to go slowly until one knows for sure what the pudding tastes like. Is there enough wisdom with enough influence to have a significant impact on the quality and farsightedness of our collective decisions? If not, we need to start the process of generating some, because the day of decision is not far off. The nature, quality, stability, and balance of any self-programmable system determines if evolutionary acceleration will eventually cause that system to take giant leaps forward or backward. Great opportunity and great risk travel together down the road of SEF design and chemical manipulation. Of course, digital consciousness does have some major advantages over biological systems. If the resulting cumulative profitability assessment goes negative, it can always preserve, save, previous states and then punch the undo or reset button, while retaining lessons learned, One of those cool digital tricks that make carbon-based systems envious. I know what you are thinking, you are coveting the degrees of freedom contained within digital systems. You desperately want your spouse, mother-in-law, and the neighbor's dog to have undo and reset buttons. Be careful of what you wish for, you might get it before you understand all the ramifications. You will learn in subsequent chapters that you, your spouse and his or her mother as WELJ as the neighbor's dog are, at the most fundamental level, individuated subsets of digital consciousness. More amazing yet, you will clearly understand the how, purpose, and interworkings of THJ's big picture digital reality model. No, that is not true, you are being pessimistic. Such an understanding will not be a delusion, or serve as proof that I have driven you insane. It is not as far out or as difficult a concept as it first appears. Some well-respected hard science types are in my corner on this one, and one will notice a few of them to row in section 6, chapter 19, book 3. There is more to an operational consciousness than an on-off switch. You also have reset, pause, record, rewind, fast forward, playback, slow motion, instant replay, edit, picture in a picture, and repeat buttons. So pay attention to this dude and discover how to operate your consciousness fully. It would be a shame for your consciousness to sit there idly flashing zeros in its display for a lifetime because you never bothered to learn how to use the controls. Here comes ladies and gentlemen. The one, the only, the source of all that is, the generator of reality. Alright, let's give a big round of digital applause. Get those digits moving, folks. Book 1, Section 2, Chapter 30 I 253. Ladies and gentlemen and distinguished members of the press, this is the moment we have all been waiting for. As the highlight of our program tonight, the omniscient digital consciousness dude from the beginning has agreed to answer one question from the human gallery. This is an unprecedented moment in the history of existence, ladies and gentlemen. Before us lies the answer to any of the great questions of our time, past, present, or future. Not all at once, please. Quiet. Quiet, please. Yes, Ms. Gumwrapper from the Seattle Sunshine, what is your question? SHHHHH. Quiet, everyone. I cannot hear the question. What is AUM's favorite color? Come now, Ms. Gumwrapper. Don't you think that is a tad shallow? Quickly, let's take another question. Okay, Ms. Anchordesk from the Evening Views, what is your question? Does AUM wear briefs or boxers? Oh, good grief. Okay, let's get a question from somewhere other than the press box. AUM's getting up, he's walking away, shaking his head. Come back. Sir, we are not all from the press, we can do better. It's just that, well sir, to be honest, PEOPLE want to know, sir. Sir. What's the answer, sir? Briefs or boxers? You promised, sir, you promised. Don't go. Please sir, briefs or boxers? Give us a sign. He is gone, folks. Well, you saw it? The big dude was here and left without saying a word. Not a single word. What do you think, Johnny? Well, Dan, when AUM walked off I thought I saw his shoulders bobbing up and down. Do we have that instant replay yet? See that little jiggle there? Can we get a close-up of that? Look at that, Dan, definitely bobbing up and down. Alright folks, there you have it. Now pick up those phones and call in your opinion. That's 1-900-$0000-0000. Was AUM laughing or crying when he walked away, shaking his head? Let's run that playback again, Johnny. Yep, that's a definite jiggle. There. What does our studio audience think? Laughing or crying? That is the big dole. Lar question for tonight. Alright, enough silliness. Let's settle down and get back low work. You get the picture. the digital consciousness AUO is renamed AUM when the degree of complexity and opportunity, possibilities, evolves sufficient awareness and mental function capable of creating, evolving, storing, and manipulating self-modifying content, process, value, and purpose. In the next chapter, we will see how time generates space and how they both together generate space-time, also we can experience. Why? Because as Eve 1:11 knows, experience is the best teacher. 31. The birth of space-time. How space is created by enforcing a constant speed limit in PMR. As I will demonstrate, space and time are closely interrelated. Accordingly, we will refer to them as a single entity called space-time. Space-time, in this context, is a construct of consciousness. It is not a physical substance or a thing, it is not a physical construct, it is created by imposing a set of constraints upon a subset of the larger REAUD. PMR scientists describe space-time as a continuum in which events or physical objects with associated times appear to be located or moving relative to some observer. It is also described as a manifold which is sometimes time-like and sometimes space-like, depending on how one interacts with it. Space-time, from the point of view of my big toe, is a particular pattern of constraints applied the energy transfers between individuated consciousnesses. Space-time exists within the digital media that support the rule set that defines our perception and thus our physical experience. It has a structural component, space-uk, and a dynamic component, time-like. Space-time is the construct within which our fleshy bodies appear to live and interact. It is a consciousness interface filter that defines the perception, experience, of physical matter reality, PMR, to participating sentient conscious entities. The experiences of PMR space, PMR time, as well as PMR mass, energy, and gravity are all derived from the space-time constraints placed on interacting consciousness. These goofy-sounding statements are explained in detail in section 4. By then they will seem much more reasonable and credible than they do now. When I say AUM invented space-time, or AUM, followed by any. 256 my big toe the birth of space-time, how space is created. Action verb, I mean in the evolutionary sense, the way fish invent lungs and legs with which they turn themselves into amphibians. Don't get anthropomorphic on me here and postulate AUM as a little old man with a long white beard making people out of space-time day on day 7. That is a perfectly nice metaphor, but it is not where this discussion logically leads. This is an effort to improve science and model reality, not to expose and follow threads of big truth that turn up in various religious metaphors, though it may accomplish both simultaneously. AUM utilizes a particular subset of its consciousness digital energy, a portion of its organizational potential, a chunk of thought space, in which a uniform set of constraints are imposed on all energy transfers between individuated subsets of consciousness that inhabit that particular chunk, virtual reality dimension. If the constraints are represented by a rule set that defines the properties of space-time, the virtual reality dimension created is one of the PMRK, perhaps our PMR. Thus, space-time is a SPE-chain perceptual construct defined within a dimension or subset of AUM's consciousness. The space-time rule set delivers a consistent experience to interacting individuated units of consciousness. Is this English? I know this description of space-time is somewhere between difficult and impossible to understand right now, but if you hang with me through this chapter and section 4, what now appears to be off the wall and confused will eventually become both reasonable and crystal clear. I decided to jump right in and tell you what space-time is before I developed the background necessary for you to understand it, because I think that having some idea of where we are going will help you synthesize the concepts required to get there. The experience of space-time is produced by a consciousness construct that constrains interactions between individuated chunks or subsets of consciousness. The .01 purpose of spacetime is to produce a specialized consistent virtual experience to individual constrained subsets of consciousness called conscious entities 01 beings. Don't worry, these concepts should be difficult to comprehend at this time. As always, open-minded skepticism defines the correct approach. Be patient, believe it or not, there is a coherent and logical process that leads to these descriptions, but it may be a while before we get to it and through it. Let's go back to building a logical model from the bottom up. AUIVI, under pressure to improve itself, must evolve profitable internal environments and processes that methodically reduce the entropy of consciousness, that is, the entropy of its own system. Spacetime is one such environment. Within the spacetime structure, the PMR rule set defines the Book 1, Section 2, Chapter 31 I 257. Processes that make us and our spacetime uniquely profitable to AUM digital simulations, like those run on our mainframes or within TBC. Generally model what appear to be analog events at the macro level. Likewise, we will develop a macro model of how AUM might conceptualize digital spacetime in terms of spacetime cells and the time required to pass information between those cells. This should be more satisfying and more helpful than simply stating that spacetime and the PLVIR rule set constitute an optimized design solution for a virtual reality simulator that serves as an interactive multiplayer consciousness quality development trainer for units of individuated consciousness. Let's start by conceiving spacetime as a construct of spacetime cells. Remember, these spacetime cells are conceptual, the result of a Gedanken experiment in the mind of AUM. We will show that spacetime cells must be uniform in form, function, and makeup in order to produce the underlying structure for a simple isotropic experience space, reality, that can be used to improve AUM's evolutionary profitability. To help make th.is metaphor more concrete, let's say that these spacetime cells reside in the spacetime part of the mind of AUM. Next, let's drop down one more level of detail and separate space from time. The structural basis of this model is space-like, and provides the spatial concept or space part of AUM's Gedanken experiment, while time provides a dynamic basis for this conceptualization that leads to the possibility of order change and therefore growth. Spacetime subsequently becomes the fundamental media for a uniquely dimensioned subreality or virtual reality within the larger consciousness system. It would appear that spacetime is more profitable, useful, or advantageous to AUM if the space part functions as a simple 3D isotropic experience space for interacting consciousness, because that is how it has successfully evolved. It should be relatively easy to picture a three-dimensional matrix of uniform isotropic spacetime reality cells in your mind, which is what I imagine AUM started with, but that was only the beginning. No need to grab your dictionary for the scientifically challenged. Isotropic is one of those $5 cool-sounding techno-speak words with a 10-cent meaning that we technoids love to use to impress the masses of busyness mjors who make more money than we do. It simply means that conceptual spacetime is not directionally unique, that within the consciousness of AUM, it is, reacts, interacts, propagates, behaves, the same irrespective of how AUM looks at it, applies it, thinks about it, or interacts with it. Keep in mind, chat, we are talking about the concept or idea of spacetime within Che digital mind, that is AUM. Within a spaceless consciousness. 258 I My Big TOE The birth of spacetime, how space is created. Direction has no meaning. As the concept of space solidifies around its defining constraints, isotropic provides a simpler, more straightforward conceptualization of a virtual space. That the implementation of the space-time Nile set, governing PMR time and energy as well as 3D space, has non-Euclidean consequences presents no logical difficulty. The relativity buffs UE probably choking this description of an isotropic, Euclidean conceptualization of space. However, the preceding assertions create no conflict with the relativity of our perception in the PMR subset, where all coordinate systems may be moving arbitrarily relative to each other, each being as fundamental as any other. 1. Or does it conflict with the chunky non-homogeneous distribution of mass/energy that interacts by the rules of gravitation? The idea of an isotropic space begins with the definition of light speed as the primary constraining constant. Although we are describing the space part of AUM's consciousness with simple Euclidean geometry, PMR space will appear R.O. be curved, non-Euclidean, to a well-instrumented high-tech perceiver experiencing physical reality within PMR. The bottom line is that as long as there is no fundamental physical inertial frame within a CHLMKY PMR, curved space-time defined by general relativity continues to represent an elegant model of our perception within PMR, even if we assume a simple Euclidean frame of reference for conceptualizing virtual space in the mind of AUM. Our PMR spacetime experience is a derivative OT, or is based on, the constraints of the spacetime rule set that orders our particular reality. You will see later that the spacetime rule set resident within TBC defines the details of the constraints that define our physical reality and thus our physics. If you are not a relativity guru, and don't have a clue what the previous two paragraphs are all about, forget about it, it is not important. Physicists, having long ago buried Euclid in their physical big picture, tend to be a little slow in giving up old thought patterns. That the perception, from within PMR, of a curved physical space (d) be derived from the concept of an isotropic space is not that difficult to understand, you merely run the traditional paradigm in reverse. Recall that each reality cell exists as a duality, a condition relative to some different condition, each condition existing only in relation to the other. Conceptually, adjacent space-time cells communicate by changing state in sequence, thus enabling a distortion or non-uniformity to propagate through the matrix. IL was the concept of a Passadon communications technique, sequential cellular interaction, that led AUM to develop the idea of space. A cell or group of cells can be specialized to keep time. Book 1, Section 2, Chapter 31 I 259. With their constant oscillations in order to set the pace for controlled cell-to-cell propagation. They may be independent of AUM's main or fundamental dock and can be set to any frequency as long as it is less than AUO's fundamental frequency. The smallest time increment, delta t, in spacetime, 1 quantum of spacetime time or equivalently 1 quantum of PMR time, must be some positive non-zero integer, n, times the smallest time increment fundamental to AUM. The smallest rime increment fundamental to AUM is called the fundamental time quantum. LT is the smallest time quantum possible within the larger reality. Delta t is also the minimum time required to change the state of a spacetime reality cell. All spacetime will subsequently march to the beat of delta t. Distortions can appear to move through spacetime at a maximum velocity of 1 spacetime cell per delta t. Keep in mind that a spacetime cell is in non-geometric, distanceless thought space. We are generating only the concept of space within the spacetime part of AUM's consciousness. This spacetime concept is implemented by defining the constraints that bound it. Once the constraints are defined within the PMR rule set, the consequences, properties of space rime, can be easily computed. Let me say this once again because it is an unusual and important concept. We are not creating a physical 3D space or a physical 4D spacetime out of consciousness reality cells. Physical space, and your experience of it, is an illusion, a trick of your individuated mind, a virtual reality within the actual reality of your consciousness. I am developing the existence of a concept or idea of space within AUM's consciousness, an idea that will evolve to provide the experience of space T0 and individuated consciousness. Space as a mental construct, not physical space itself, there is no such thing as physic.ti space. Are you kidding? No physical space? What is this all around me? I learned to calculate volumes of simple 3D shapes in 6th grade, making that outrageous statement, there is no such thing as physical space, is not as obviously dumb as it may first appear. You will hear that same exact statement directly from Albert Einstein and other knowledgeable top scientists in Section 6, Chapter 19, Book 3. Do not jump to any conclusions. We have measured the upper limit on information transfer in PIVR as c, which is the symbol commonly used by scientists to represent the speed of light. c is approximately 186,000 miles per second or 3x(L0 meters per second. In less precise terms for you lecnophobes, the speed of light is exceptionally quick, almost instantaneous, like greased lightning, smokin', or haulin' ass depending on your socio-economic. 260 I my big TOE the birth of space-time, how space is created. And generational affiliation, the degree of degeneracy you take pride in. At least that is the view from PMR. From my experience, and that of many other NPMR explorers, communications are seemingly instantaneous in spaceless NPMR and not restricted by the relatively pokey transmission rate of light speed as they are in PMR. For this reason, it would seem safe to assume that the integer value of n is an exceedingly large number. Where, as you recall, n is the number of AUM's fundamental time increments, fundamental time quanta, that tick-tock away during one, very much larger, time increment of the space-time clock, one quantum, delta t, of PMR time. For the record, there are also many fundamental time quanta, smallest chunk of time on AUM's fundamental clock, ticking away during one increment of the independent clock defining time within NPMR, a quantum of NPMR time. You will learn in Section 5, Chapter 7, Book 3, that n needs to be a large number so that the statisticians in NPJ_1FR have plenty of NPMR time to compute probable reality surfaces between successive delta t. Likewise, AUM sets up NPMR with a larger time quantum than its own, enabling AUM to process data between NPMR time increments. Remember, whoever iterates with the smallest time quantum is usually in the driver's seat. LT is easy to study, manipulate, or observe beings, objects, and energy that move in super slow motion relative to yourself, as long as you do not get bored. AUM evolves, chooses, the optimum n to suit its needs, easy to study and kernel-lect results without getting bored. From my experience and the EJ1 perience of others, an enormous number of increments, quanta, of NPI/IR time passed meaning each quantum of PMR time. We will make good use of this concept in Section 5 where past, future, and paranormal communications are discussed. Information you transfer also seems instantaneous here in PMR, over short distances, because light speed is exceptional. Ly fast relative to other natural PMR velocities. It would seem that you must be careful in using your direct experience to determine what is or is not instantaneous. For large distances, such as the distance from Earth to its nearest star, 4.5 light-years to the Alpha Centauri triplet, even light speed seems agonizingly slow. In NPMR thought space, individual things are not separated by physical distance and information does not have to be transmitted through space in order to travel between the sender and receiver. Nevertheless, within NPMR, information must propagate from the sender to the receiver, but not through space, there is no spatial distance between. Book 1, Section 2, Chapter 31 I-261. Thus, it requires some NPMR time for the information to make the trip between the unique digital mind spaces of the sender and receiver. Time is needed to flip the cell states that represent content within the receiver. Think of this pitosis as analogous to display time, or similar to how your computer shuffles data within its core memory. I know, this is starting to get weird and I can see your eyes beginning to glaze over with information overload. Clarity will come, collect the big ideas and let the details go for now. Let us do a quick review of the high points and go on. AUM's time is the most fundamental because it has the smallest time increment, quanta, and is used to define all the others. Imagine, for the sake of putting some concrete meat on these highly abstract bones, that AUM's fundamental quantum of time is 10 nanoseconds, 10, s, while npmrs is 1062s, and pmrs is ios. Each is a billion, 10 feet 6 inches, times larger than the previous one. Using these numbers, it follows that delta t, which in our example is 1011 seconds and represents pmr's quantum of time, is defined by AUM to be 10 fundamental quanta, n equals 1036. That I.O, for every 10 ticks of AUM's, fundamental, clock, 1 quantum of space-time time is increment in OU 1 dimension of reality, PMR. After 10 zero ticks of AUM's fundamental clock, an entire second of our PMR time has dribbled by. Talk about slow motion. Just as there are many fundamental time quanta in one quantum increment of npmr time, likewise there are many of these npmr time quanta in one quantum of PMR time. The relatively huge magnitude of one quantum of PMR time, one quantum of space-time time, is exactly the time one acquired for one space-time reality cell to change its state from non-distorted to distorted, or vice versa. The upper limit on propagating distortions in space-time is thus one space-time reality cell per quantum of space-time time. We define that upper speed limit as c, a constant whose value has been evolved by AUM and which has been experimentally measured in PMR to be 3 × 10 meters per second. C, therefore, conceptually defines the virtual size or conceptual spatial extent of a space-time reality cell. Thus, the virtual width of one space-time cell divided by delta t, which is defined as one quantum of PMR time, would equal c. Let's use the values given in our arbitrary numerical example above to calculate the space-time reality cell width. The virtual width of one space-time reality cell equals c, PMR time quantum delta t, equals 3x10m/s, 10-s, equals 3x10 meters, which is about the size of Planck's length, 16 m, a measure of 262 I. My big TOE, the birth of space-time, how space is created. Point at which some of the world's best physicists say that our 30 space becomes granular, is composed of non-continuous discrete cells. I purposely made up the numbers in the preceding example to be simple round numbers and to force the width of a space-time reality cell to be near Planck's length. They are for illustrative purpose only, do not take the actual values too seriously. I know that this is clear to you, but let me remind some of the other readers to set aside their habituated PMR concepts and keep in mind that AUO's talking clocks are not actually ticking off fractions of our seconds. It is ticking in mind space, within an aware consciousness that can differentiate between this way and that way, flip-flopping atoms of consciousness called reality cells whose state can be manipulated at will and with regularity. These atoms of consciousness in turn produce molecules of space-time. The tick-tock of AUM's clock represents the fundamental timepiece, the primordial clock, a mental process within consciousness from which our PMR clocks are derived. Our time, measured in seconds, fractions of the periodic revolutions of the heavenly bodies or more recently some number of atomic oscillations, is a shadow of fundamental time. It is our sensory perception of a specific constrained and limited implementation of the more fundamental time defined by AUM consciousness. In the example above, information can travel much faster than c, the speed of light in PMR, in npmr because the quantum of npmr time is a billion, 10 feet 3 inches, times smaller than a quantum of PMR time. As I mentioned earlier, OS contains physical, PMR, and non-physical, npmrn, components that are interactive with each other. Between time increments in PMR, time stands still in PMR. Between increments, things continue to happen, distortions, patterns, and information continue to propagate, because the clock keeps on ticking in npmrn. In other words, while time appears to stand still in PMR, npmrn continues to race along through 10 feet 8 inches more time increments worth of activity. And, between each npmrn time increment, while time is standing still in npmrn, AUM has another fundamental time units in which to conduct business as usual. If this time standing still between increments thing got you buffaloed, forget your habitual notions of continuous time and consider how a complex dynamic simulation might increment time within various subroutines. Time appears to stand still in a given subroutine until the next time that subroutine is called and the local time variable is again incremented. A clear description of time loops within simulations is given early on in section 5. Unless this concept is driving you crazy, it can wait until you get to book 3. Trust me, 1036 or a billion, 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 L000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,0 0 0 0 comma 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 0 0 0.0 is a really big number and could. Book 1, Section 2, Chapter 31 I 263. Represent a relatively long time for AUM to wait for 1 pmr delta t to come and go, depending on how long AUM perceives a fundamental time quantum to be. To our view, AUM is capable of moving in super-fast motion. Imagine watching all the movies ever made in a fraction of a second. That represents some serious fast-forwarding. On the other hand, ALVL can pace itself however it wishes and often seems to take the long view, exercising plenty of patience. AUM's view of us may be like our view of some sluggish bacteria growing in a petri dish. Imagine what it would be like if we each aged 1 year every 100,000 years, we would have a lifespan of about 8 million years, and had brilliant, nearly perfect memories and minds that were kept busy with many important things to do and think about. We could watch rivers and mountains come and go as well as study mutations in successive generations of quickly breeding fruit flies. If you can imagine this, you have a minute glimmer of AUM's perspective. AUM does not seem to be getting bored or to be in any hurry. AUM's perception of the passage of time, that AUM itself creates by regularly flipping states in order to organize and orchestrate IRS activity, is very different from ours. Do not anthropomorphically project your sense of the passage of time co-AUM. Imagine how subroutines within a digital computer, or the computer itself, might perceive the passage of time. The existence of multiple levels of quantized time is why information transfer in NPMR seems near instantaneous compared to pokey light speed in PMR's space-time construct. From 1 PMR, PMR would appear to be running in slow motion. Nevertheless, NPMR has its own speed limit, as does AUM itself, because it requires a finite time to change the state of any cell from uniform to not uniform. That is how we define the concept of time in the first place. AUM can define, evolve, as man clocks as necessary for each group of specialized cells that define a unique dimension of reality. Our space-time reality, PMR, is implemented by one such group of specialized space-time cells. This collection of specialized cells existing as a subgroup within the larger group of NPMR provides the computing resources, memory, structure, rule sets, and processing, required to actualize, compute the consequences of, that subgroup as a unique virtual reality within NPMR. Visualize a reality dimension, like PMR, within a larger reality dimension, like NPMR, within a larger reality dimension, like AUM. There may be many subgroups that define unique dimensions of reality within NPMR. We will see in Section 5 how the various sizes of time all derived as integer numbers of AUM's fundamental quantum of Lime, each in their 264 I my big TOE the birth of space-time, how space is created. Own dimension can be directly related nested time loops with 11 in a simulation. What? A bizarre thought. Reality as a layered digital thought simulation within AUM, hang on to that concept and we will explore it in detail later. The significance of multiple levels of quantized time will become clear and seem less arbitrary. AFT.ER. We have completed Section 5. Here is a quick summary of the concept of time within NPMR. Keep in mind that NPMR has no space and therefore no distance, it exists outside of PMR's space-time. Without space and distance, the propagation time for information takes on a different perspective. Because AUO and AUM can FLLP states relative to itself only so quickly, there is an upper limit on the speed with which distortions can be propagated. It is a much larger upper limit than we can imagine with our relatively snail-like light speed that sets the upper limit in PMR. Time, or equivalently, frequency is a fundamental attribute of AUM. WHE1EAS. The notion of space is derived from time by specifying a constant velocity of propagation of information. That is why the citizens of space-time must live with c as the celestial speed limit. Time is fundamental, space is derived from time by specifying the constraint c. For those who occasionally visit the PMR physics fringe, the fact that we might be clever enough to take a space-time shortcut through a wormhole does not change the fact that c remains the upper speed limit on information propagation through space that defines our local experiential space within AUM's consciousness. Likewise, if data transfer rates seem to exceed light speed in certain peculiar situations, this implies only that the defining rule set has a level of generality that allows special cases to appear to violate the speed limit c. The reality in which we interact with each other one is a virtual classroom or learning lab designed to help us reduce individual entropy and grow the quality of our consciousness. As consciousness, that is what we do, that is how evolution challenges us. That many implications of our rule set await our discovery, the physics of the future, simply makes that class more and more interesting, challenging, and educational. New discovery creates better understanding as well as new opportunities to learn. How did AUM come up with the constant c? By occupying all the possibilities and building on the best results, by trial and error, by evolution. JT was derived by applying the fundamental process on a scale and at a pace that is difficult for us to comprehend. Keep in mind that AUM has no body to feed, does not take up space, and is not preoccupied with perfumed aumectes. AUM's evolutionary experiments are roughly analogous low-R Gedenhen experiments or compular simulations, and thus can be done in Book 1, Section 2, Chapter 31 I 265. See variation relatively quickly. With the aid of its specialized binary computing part, AUM can evolve at an incredibly fast pace compared to biological systems. The big computer, TBC, and the even bigger computer, EBC, discussed in Section 5, Chapters 6 and 11 respectively of Book 3, are actually only tiny subsets of AUM's computing part. If you enjoy torturing and abusing the English language as much as I do, you have my permission to describe AUM as a consciousness system digital being thingamajig. Reality cells, memory cells, binary cells, everything seems come down to cells. Cells are discrete units of state-specific relational content, and represent both information and organizational substance, not necessarily physical matter. Awareness, form, function, content, and purpose all flow from the possible interactions of reality cells, the basic building blocks of aware consciousness. All cellular and digital creations exhibit granularity at some level of detail. Both our reality and our perception of it are granular at the root. At the bottom layer of organization within reality, one will find discrete unit relationally formed and arrayed into constrained dynamic patterns of relationship. The complexity and organization of these patterns are progressively developed within a remordial undifferentiated potential energy, unaware dim consciousness, by the iterative and recursive operation of the fundamental process. The mechanics of evolution naturally act upon any entity that possesses a substantial number of self-generated alternative choices and possibilities. 171E process is simple: maintain the winners, discard the losers. More or less random permutations and combinations are applied statistic TLLY to systems that have a significant array of potential outcomes. The winners continue to evolve while the losers fade away or maintain the status quo. Sometimes an evolving consciousness system in rhyme develop terrific complexity and seemingly endless potential as the fundamental process iterates upon itself repetitively, eventually evolving something that begins to mimic its source. When the will turns full ci1 cli and the successful product of the evolutionary drive towards self-improvement begins to take on the characteristics of its source, it becomes a partner in the process of consciousness evolution. Imagine this. An individuated constrained high-entropy fragment of consciousness eventually evolves, profitably self-organizes, to low-entropy wholeness. As a pen of the source from which it was cleft, it lowers the entropy, increasing the quality, furthering the evolution, of the whole by the amount of its personal growth. This individual contribution. 266 My big TOE The birth of space-time, how space is created. To lowering the entropy of the entire consciousness system constitutes the upstroke of the consciousness cycle. The downstroke is represented by the creation of individuated consciousness by uniquely bounding subsets of undeveloped, raw, consciousness, of relatively high entropy, that are capable of eventually evolving toward lower entropy states. Are you beginning to sense the great cycle of consciousness evolution of which you are a part? A vague understanding of how and why the consciousness cycle operates to sustain the ecology of the larger consciousness system is your first peek at the big picture. The consciousness cycle describes a mechanism that allows consciousness energy to continuously organize itself within the larger consciousness ecosystem. You are an important player in a consciousness cycle. TJ1 at drives system profitability, capability, operational power, and brightness upwards as it exhausts entropy. We will pursue these concepts more fully in Q1 Chapter 24, Book 2. Let's pull it all together. The constant upper limit of c, speed of light, defines the concepel of both distance and space within the space-time subset of AUM's consciousness. Each so-called space-time cell, by definition, now has the conceptual attribute of extent. Thus AUM invented, thought up, or evolved, the concept of space by imposing the constraint of a constant maximum velocity of propagation of information within its space part. Using the previous numerical example to add a sense of conoidness, delta t is the smallest unit 0-1 quanta of time within spacetime. It is 1 tick on AUM's spacetime clock, but 10 feet 8 inches ticks on AUL/1F's NPMR clock, and a low ticks on AUM's fundamental clock. Each spacetime reality cell now has the conceptual attribute of spatial extent. It is C111/SEC, delta t SEC. Wide, Abu L3x 10 to 30 milliars, approximately Planck's length. The science, engineering, and math types need to chill out. I'll know that I am about to drive you crazy with repetition, but most of the rest of us are only beginning to get comfortable with powers of Len and C notation, the concept of interrelated learned quanta, and the calculations of space-time cell width. Take care not to BMNOUL your Dutch or overheat your engine. This is a good time to lie back and coast a little. To say the same thing in the opposite direction, if an imagined row of adjacent P1 VLR space-time cells, each of width, c, delta t, uniformly propagate a distortion by changing state consecutively, 1 each delta t, the distortion propagates at the velocity c. Thus the cells in the space part of AUM now have the attribute of size. This is not to say that they have size, or begin to take up space, they have the concept of size. You could say they carry the attribute or property of size, that they have virtual size, or that they simulate or model size. Book 1, Section 2, Chapter 31 I 267. These space-time reality cells are a part of AUM and exist as thoughts exist, without space. Because AUM's evolution of the space-time rule set found optimal profitability within an experiential isotropic space, the functional propagation of distortion in any imagined direct ion is the same throughout this uniform space-time matrix of reality cells. To maintain a constant propagation velocity in all directions, it is convenient if these space-time reality Ls are conceptually spherical. 3D solid geometry becomes a concept, an attribute of the space part, and any propagation in any virtual direction will find the virtual distance to any neighboring cell to be the same. More succinctly, the spherical diameter equals the conceptual width of any cell in any direction equals c delta t. The concept of space, distance and direction, and the concept of time are interrelated through the constant c, and merge conceptually as space-time. Don't worry about the voids that exist between spheres 1v hen packing spheres in a 3D matrix, that an issue in PMR space-time but not an issue in digital thought space where space-time is created and defined. Similarly, energetic interactions among various forms of energy and the invariance of 1f1 inch frames within the experience of PMR reality are not in conflict with the Euclidean frame of mind of AUM. Our PMR spacetime, with E.n which the experience of matter in our universe is created, see section 4, represents only one uniquely constrained spacetime application existing within a spacetime part, as opposed to the spacetime part, of AUM. There are other spacetime parts, or spacetime dimensions, of AUM corresponding to the other PMRs, mentioned in Chapter 4, Book 3. From our point of view, these other PMRs exist in non-physical worlds in other dimensions. From our perspective, every subset of specialized reality cells in AUM defines another dimension of existence, another reality, or, if you prefer, another virtual reality. The specialized pans of AUM are to OM as SYS lems of thoughts are to us, a rough analogy even if we had super memories. These specialized subsets of AUM represent separate experiments in consciousness evolution propagating their way to whatever comes out of them. Digital spacetime is implemented by a basic rule set that defines the profitability criteria required to evolve the content of a given dimension. Each virtual reality with self-modifying content automatically begins to evolve its own uniquely profitable configurations as its possibilities are explored. Patterns of interaction within the PMR spacetime subsystem will eventually evolve to contain the attribute of content, information, and substance, as patterns of light, sound, and neurons within our biological SYS lems or as patterns of stars, comets, galaxies, and solar systems within our universe. 268 My Big TOE The birth of spacetime, how space is created. As a direct result of the spacetime rule set, a few billion years ago clumps of biological cells began a series of similar experiments in specialization. Specialized subsets of cells became the food section, digestion, the sensor section, eyes, nose, skin, ears, taste buds, the motion section, tail, fins, flippers, legs, wings, and the control section, central nervous system, brain. Then, communication among the various specialized parts was established, followed by communication between individual entities. Thus AUM sprouts reality systems as the Earth sprouts species of plants and animals, each contained in its own dimension or piece of thought space within TBC, and all on the same network. AUM creates dimensions and manipulates their content similarly to how we create ideas and write them down as paragraphs of patterns of symbols. AUM's creative thoughts and use of dimension to separate specialized parts of itself is roughly comparable to our creative writing and use of paragraphs, books, or documents low separate and bound specialized chunks of content. Note that we generally do not refer to higher or lower dimensions. Higher and lower have no meaning relative to non-geometrical dimensions. Dimensions, and their corresponding realities, are different in the same way hooks are different. Some may be simple or complex, some may be more or less useful to the consciousness system. However, all are specialized in one response to evolutionary pressures to carry out their particular function. All specialized functions contribute to the self-improvement or entropy reduction of the whole. You see, this consciousness system is not that weird or mystical and works the same as any evolving complex system. For one example, it must develop a balanced ecosystem, system of relationships, among its large number of interacting, interdependent parts. You now have the top-level hand-waving description of the origins of space-time and the nature of dimension. This is only the beginning of a more in-depth discussion that will continue through the next 3 sections and 2 books. Before long, you will appreciate space-time as a rule-based consciousness construct that constrains energy exchanges between individuated subsets of consciousness, beings, in order to produce a specialized virtual experience where they can profitably interact, and that description will make sense. By the end of section 4, all these scattered bits of theory will begin to pull together into a high-resolution big picture. Keep in mind our earlier discussion of belief and spin. The logical solidity and reasonableness of Lee's discussion may not be the only, or the major, factor who leads you to your conclusions. To optimize the return on your envisioning, your analysis should be independent of belief-based paradigms. If your approach is Book 1, Section 2, Chapter 31 I 269. Open-minded, you will find that the evaluation process itself is usually more valuable than the final conclusions reached. All great sages know this one big truth: you can lead a jackass to water and, if you are clever enough, into seed to drink, but you cannot make it do the backstroke or gargle and spit the water back out. That is why this trilogy is strictly for open-minded humans. If you see a jackass with a copy, please confiscate it immediately before he or she gets any big ideas. But please be careful. It is also well known by the great sages that a little big truth rattling about within the small mind of a jackass can be a dangerous thing. That is everything I know about common horse sense. Thus, as always, you are on your own at the watering hole of big truth. Before temporarily leaving the subject of space-time and ending this chapter, let's make an effort to bridge the gap between the fundamental view of the binary reality cell space-time part of AUM's consciousness and the digital systems view of the implementation of space-time within TBC. AUM, aware consciousness, and therefore space-time, our physical reality, is ultimately based upon the existence of reality cells WI-LIN consciousness. Equivalently, one could say that space-time is a construct of consciousness. Some may be tempted to say that space-time is constructed of consciousness, but that statement is likely to spread more confusion than illumination. Think of consciousness as a digital media rather than a building material. At the root, TBC, memory, patterns, logic, and processing, is conceptually based on the binary property of reality cells. Let us recap the evolutionary road from AUO low AUM. Primordial AUO is a relatively simple, uniform, high-entropy, energy form. That is the basic foundation of consciousness. Reality cells are created by the relative existence of a this way and that way pair, a distorted or non-uniform existence existing in relation to a non-distorted or uniform existence. The proliferation of reality cells and the interaction between reality cells creates complexity and a greater potential for self-organization that eventually leads to a more comprehensive lower entropy self-awareness that in turn leads to intelligence, values, personality, and purpose. In scientific terms, a lower entropy consciousness system has more power, more energy available to do work, a higher, more useful level of organization. In common terms, a lower entropy digital system commands more usable energy, more profitable organization, and, therefore, becomes capable of creating greater and more profitable configurations of itself. Additionally, a lower entropy consciousness eventually develops the ability to use 270 My Big TOE The Birth of Space-Time, How Space is Created. Directed conscious intent to reduce its entropy further. The rate of evolutionary progress increases as the system pulls itself up by its bootstraps, evolves, to actualize lower and lower entropy configurations. The specific nature, physics, of our reality is defined by the space-time rule set, which defines the constraints that limit what is possible. The space-time rule set is a collection of patterns or algorithms within TBC that defines the limits and relational properties of our physical experience. The space-time rule set subsumes our physics. It is implemented at the lowest level by constraining the interaction between individual and groups of reality cells, and at the highest level by constraining individuated subsets of awareness. Reality cells are roughly analogous to the transistors on a computer processor chip. They come in very large numbers and are the most basic active units of the processor and memory. Like reality cells, each transistor is a thing that can be on or off, a 1 or a 0, this way or that way, distort or undistort. At the next higher level of generality, is the processor's basic instruction set that defines operations and processes for storing, retrieving, and performing arithmetical and logical operations. In our analogy, the processor's basic instruction set is analogous to basic cognitive functioning within AUM. At the next level of abstraction, we get to the space-time rule set, which is analogous to algorithms written in assembly language. Our experience is generated at the next higher level of abstraction by an AUM-TBC to individuated consciousness interface, which is analogous to a simulation programmed in object-oriented C, where we are the objects. AUM is the computer, the programmer, and the operating SYSLM. We sentient conscious beings are, as individuated subsets of consciousness, a bounded subset of highly organized, evolving, interactive reality cells. As an analog to space-time, consider a custom-designed special-purpose processor such as a digital signal processor, DSP, chip. Understanding the RNLES patterns, governing the transfer of energy to and from transistors in a special-purpose microprocessor would provide some understanding of the most basic relationships in the processor's design, implementation, and capacity. Likewise, understanding the rules governing the transfer of information between space-time reality cells should produce some of the most fundamental relationships of physics. In Section 4, you will see how that works. Physical experience is generated when the perception of an individuated consciousness, sentient being, is constrained to follow the space-time rule set. Imagine a specialized space-time virtual reality trainer, Opraling. Book 1, Section 2, Chapter 31 I-271. Within a subset of digital calculation space called a dimension, that is constrained by the space-time rule set to provide a OSLI consistent operational experience that enables an individuated consciousness to evolve to lower entropy states by exercising its intent through free will choice. The specific relationships defining AF space-time instruction set constitute the laws of space-time physics, PMR physics. Applied mathematicians, scientists, and engineers have a tendency to define their reality in terms of its constraints expressed as physical constants. For example, c, the speed of light in a vacuum, defines the speed limit of matter in p.mr. Think of c as one of several local PMR space-time constants that constrains our physical reality to a certain experience set. Likewise, it is reasonable to assume there are constants that constrain the bigger picture as well. For example, given that a finite growing digital consciousness system cannot create an infinite number of reality cells and that the information contained within that digital consciousness system is limited by the capacity of the cistern. 1, an upper limit on the R.total number of reality cells perhaps, then, after the system's native technology has stabilized, the ratio of the size of the system to the amount of information it contains would tend toward a constant as the system matures. Picture a growing AUM where new information and new reality cells are constantly created and recycled while the entropy of the system evolves toward greater profitability by more productively using and organizing that information. The point is, real finite systems muse always deal with constraints and the AUM digital system thing is no exception. What does AUM do when it is done, reached capacity limitations? Being digital, it can always purge enough of its lethal productive by LSTO continue on, or purge even more than that and slart over. Consider that AUM may be a contributing player in a larger consciousness ecosystem. Just as we iteratively cycle subsets of wholly individuated consciousness through the PMR Learning Lab low help drive the consciousness cycle, AUM may recycle its own consciousness in a similar manner to drive a higher level of consciousness organization that is beyond our grasp. AUM may regularly upload lessons learned and then recycle itself, or it may simply continue to improve itself gradually as it continually and forever moves toward an absolute zero of system entropy. In either case, we come to the same conclusion: an evolving digital Dukli is never done. A few low-hanging observations need to be plucked from the practicing discussions and then we can pack IL in. You may find it interesting. Take a big picture look at he concept flow hat is unleashed by he concept, implementation, and evolution of time. 272 My big TOE The birth of space-time, how space is created. AUO evolves the exceptionally useful organizational catalyst we call J-time by maintaining a regular beat, a constant rate of oscillation. The ability of time to sequence patterns and enforce consistency allows AUO to create ordered and disciplined process and thus lower its entropy. Time enables simple existence to generate complex evolutionary potential from the explosion of new patterns, sequences, and forms that suddenly become available with the invention of dynamic process. Time generates new degrees of freedom for consciousness to explore. Time allows dim consciousness to become brilliant. Order, consistency, and regularity enable the creation of precise multi-frequency clocks, the big computer, and space-time as individuated specialized patterns of information and content within AUM. Because the attributes of space-time provide the logical conceptual structure for our experience of PMR, mass, energy, space, and hence biology, it is clear that our existence is enabled by the invention of time. It is time that allows AUO to get organized, to create, store, and use information interactively, to evolve self-aware PWPOs and develop proactively. The concept of time within the dim awareness of AUO is a byproduct of a potential energy system finding profitability in improving its self-organ function. As an incredibly effective engine for entropy reduction, time becomes an evolutionary inevitability. The fundamental process could not help but find time, an artifact of change, on the path toward greater profitability. Thus time evolves naturally within consciousness, it delivers the fundamental organizing technology that enables the decrease in entropy, winds up the digital spring, that fuels, runs, drives, and enables everything else within an advanced AUM digital system. Time is fundamental to the existence of our reality while space is a visual perception based upon time and the constraints C. As consciousness evolves, its energy spring continues to wind up as its entropy decreases. In CONUAST, within our PLVIR subsystem, the energy spring, energy that is organized, structured, and able to do work, must slowly unwind as the experiment runs its course. Physicists refer to this natural PMR structural disintegration as the second law of thermodynamics. The second law is hailed as very bad long-term news for our local reality because traditional scientists have only little toes. That music is universal to all cultures, and most creatures, and evokes a deep resonance within us seems reasonable enough when you consider that our consciousness, our being, undeniably, our entire reality, is construct of rhythm and pattern. Book 1, Section 2, Chapter 31 I 273. Take a moment to ponder the deep connection we have with our real ity. Try to think a few big thoughts, your choice, go ahead, I'll wait. You might toy with the idea of having an original insight toward developing your personal big toe. Take your time. Then when you are done, heave a deep sigh of silent resignation in appreciation of your limitations. But don't give up. Both you and AUM have to start from wherever you are and pull yourself up by your own experiential bootstraps. That is simply how consciousness evolution works. Consciousness evolution does not progress through a process of successive epiphanies. Significant entropy reduction is accomplished through an iterative process that slowly accumulates a large number of nearly infinitesimal profitable choices to produce significant growth. Trying to grow your consciousness in great leaps impedes progress by distracting you from the hundreds of small profitable choices you have the opportunity to make every day. Your consciousness quality rises and falls based upon the image that animates your everyday interactions. An even bigger picture. Will AUM ever exhaust all the possibilities? Can it grow indefinitely? Will it one day reach an unchanging stable equilibrium, still viable forever but no longer evolving? Are there other AUOS or AUMS or is really big enough for only one? And if there were LWO, how would they interact? That would dramatically raise the level of complication and create new possibilities for the fundamental process of evolution to work with. It certainly did for us. What if AUM splits in two, employing a process analogous to biological cell division, enabling it to interact with itself in an infralinear way? Biological cells figured out how to do it. Do you think they are smarter or luckier than AUM? A self-replicating AUM could build up a new consciousness thing out of VF cells, each existing within their own digital dimension. Would each AUM cell function as a single brain cell, or consciousness cell, within a stupendous group mind, or would a different and unique creature emerge? Cloning, reproducing, repairing, expanding, and merging are particularly straightforward processes within a digital medium. Ever copy a floppy? Where does the pursuit of profit lead a brilliant finite digital oneness? Groups of AUM cells could very well specialize and form a much more complex thought system thing being, and then AUMamoebas and AUMamabobs thinking around in primordial mental swamps. The biological cells of a larger bioorganism mature, die, and are replaced. In contrast, digital AUM cells may simply matme and maintain some optimal joint profitability with a larger organism, or perhaps exercise and ally recycle themselves by uploading their accumulated products of evolutionary profitability along with all other useful communicable results. 276 My big TOE an even bigger picture of accumulated experience and then reboot. AUM, like us, may serve as a cog in a much larger entropy reduction engine that is engaged in driving an even larger manifestation of the consciousness cycle toward ever lower entropy stat.es. Big picture this, consciousness systems, like future digital computers, derived from consciousness systems, like humankind, derived from consciousness systems, like TBC, derived from consciousness systems, like AUM, derived from consciousness systems, an even larger system in which AUM is only one of many contributors, all exhibiting the same fundamental structures and processes while hierarchically supporting each other at various levels and scales. Did you notice that the terminology used to describe interconnected interdependent consciousness systems at various scales and levels is similar to the terminology used to describe fractals? Consider the conceptual elegance of a consciousness evolution fractal and hold that thought W1 till 1VE will get back to it T0 ward the end of section 5. VV while you are in the mood for big thoughts, imagine this, our entire local reality, OS, containing a portion of NPMRN as well as our PMR universe, evolving on its merry way as if it were a self-contained colony of bacteria existing within a small remote corner of the space-time part of just one of the apparendi infinite number of apparently infinite AUM cells, inhabiting the gut of an Aumosaurus. LT may be fun to let a few of the possibilities that might describe AUM's external environment run wild in your imagination, but all we need to build a complete theory of everything is a simple one-celled monolithic singular AUO and its imernal environment. Logically, all that is required is a finite primo one-dial consciousness potential energy thing to exist along with the fundamental process of evolution. From only those two assumptions, I intend to derive physics, the nature of your existence, your physical universe and experience, and provide a comprehensive working model of the larger reality, all self-consistently contained between the knuckle and nail of my big toe. That should be enough. I'll publish the definitive work on Aumosaurus beyond graspus out of mindus, which is its proper Latin name, next year. Look for it at your local asylum bookstore in the humor section. Watch out for that Aumosaurus, folks. Oh no. It's beginning to squat. Hang on. This baby could blow 1,000 universes, including ours, out of its anterior subsystem in one mighty blast of digital flatulence. Book 1, Section 2, Chapter 32 I-277. The roar of a billion suns exploding simultaneously violently shakes the foundations of reality. Existence shudders and quakes in uncertain terror. Are we still here? I think so, but I'm not sure. How can you tell? that was a close call. Yeah. Wow. That really makes you proud to be an intestinal bacterium, doesn't it? Seriously folks, do you see how important it is to appreciate your fundamental limitations? If you do not, you run the risk of being unable to discriminate between silly and serious. Insisting that we, the magnificent crème de la crème of existence, could not possibly have such limitations simply adds a layer of obfuscating illogical arrogance on top of what is already beyond comprehension. With regards to the even bigger picture, the best conclusion is no conclusion. Open-minded skepticism requires no closure, and thus, accepts its limitations. It does, however, require that you put aside your normal knee-jerk responses, which have been conditioned by your ego, beliefs, and fears, in order to recognize all the possibilities. Never fear to let your mind run free, but at the same time be aware of the innate limitations of your perspective, or you may get lost wandering along the mystical shores of Never Never Land believing that what you see is what is there. 33. Infinity gets too big for real britches. In this chapter, the concept of, and necessity for, a finite AUM will become dear. You will see that AUM does not d to bt, infinite or anywhere close to infinite to generate all the reality we can comprehend. In the biological world of PMR, large biological cells must seem infinitely big to atoms. Let's translate that comparison of scale to our universe. If our entire universe was like a single atom in an apparently infinite cell of something much bigger, we actually couldn't care less, because from our minute perspective, the really big stuff isn't that important to us. Whether that cell is actually infinite or not is not an issue. If it is relatively infinite to us, that is good enough to account for everything we can know. From the smallest thing that we think we know exists, subatomic part.ids, to the largest thing we think we know x's, the universe, about 100 orders of magnitude, 10,000, are spanned. The numbers 10 and 100 are not particularly big numbers. If there were some big thing, as much big GER than our entire universe as our universe is bigger than a subatomic particle, then this big thing would be only 200 orders of magnitude big GER than one of our subatomic particles. If this big thing were itself to be the relative size of a subatomic particle to something even bigger, and if that even bigger thing was to be the relative size of a subatomic particle to something even bigger yet. Are you following me here? Our entire universe would be as a single electron to a universe that is also as an electron to a universe that is also as an electron to a universe, 4 nested universes, one inside the other, each being at a size ratio of 10,000 to the next. I think you will agree with me, that final universe is really big. This colossus really big. http://www.my-big-toe.com 280 my big toe infinity gets too big for real britches. Thing is only 400 orders of magnitude bigger than one of our own tiny electrons. And guess what? That's only 1011, and everyone knows that 10 and 400 are not big numbers. Already we have slipped beyond the far edges of your ability to comprehend. What about 10,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000 degree MJ, 10,000 bmm? That is a 1 with 100 billion zeros between it and the decimal point times bigger than an electron. That much magnitude would allow a billion nested universes existing one within the other, each being the relative size of a single electron to our universe, to the next larger universe. I can write these number bears in 2 seconds taking up only a few inches of paper. Are we close to infinity yet? No way, these are still relatively infinitesimal numbers compared to infinity. Nevertheless, we have gone far beyond the size that represents something your imagination can begin to comprehend. That about a trillion zeros, 10 And still, we are not yet a tiny minuscule fraction of the way to infinity yet. How many zeros could you write in your lifetime? How many times could you write the word trillion? Even at that, we wouldn't be dosed to infinity, we could always take that number and raise it to an exponent equal to itself. Do you get the idea of how unnecessarily big infinity is when you are talking about a real thing? AUM is a real thing, an apparently infinite something, but actually quite finite. All the PMR.S and NPMRs are real things. Reality is a real thing. Infinity is far too big for real things. You see, AUM doesn't need to be infinite. In fact, the concept of infinity brings with it all kinds of logical inconsistencies, such as infinite processes that require infinite time and infinite energy, which are always unavailable to anything real. Consequently, it is sufficient for AUM to be only relatively infinite, apparently infinite. That is enough to suit our purposes. In your mind, let the word infinity be a metaphor, not a defined mathematical abstraction. Infinite makes a handy mathematical concept but a very misleading adjective in front of a real, extant, noun. While we are on the subject of big real things being small relative to the abstract concept of infinity, let's talk about time and infinitesimal things. It is the same drill. For the sake of comparison, let's resurrect the numbers we made up in chapter 31 of this book. I bet you didn't know there have been less than 1018 of our tiny little seconds that have tick-tocked away since the Big Bang formed our universe. In case you were wondering, those 1018 seconds would consume only about 10 degree 2 piver delta C time quanta. Recall that 1 delta T equals 10 Hs. Break a second into a billion pieces and you get a nanosecond, ns. Less than 1027 nanoseconds, ns, have come and gone since the Big Bang went kaboom. http://www.my8igto.com Book 1, Section 2, Chapter 33 I-281. Break a nanosecond into another billion pieces and you get a nanosecond, NNS. There have been less than 10, NNS, since the Big Bang, and less than 10 billionths of a billionth of a billionth of a second, NNNS, ticked away since our universe began. Ls it's surprising that a 10 NNNNS long delta T time element, about iOS, could be small enough to make our gigantic PMR nanoseconds seem absolutely continuous, and that the number of them that has ticked away, for much longer than our universe has been forming, remains a relatively tiny number compared to infinity. No doubt a trivial number for an apparently infinite AUM to track. There is another important point here besides the fact that AUM is finite and real and maintains a huge excess capacity that allows it to do, think, create, and be much, much more than we can imagine. You need realize that we exist in, and have the capacity to comprehend, only a tiny, minute, infinitesimal fraction of the possibilities for existence. We have seen above that many entire universes, each progressively larger than ours, by the same amount that our W1-iverse is larger than an electron, can coexist with us, within our finite 3D space-time reality. Likewise, in the opposite direction, many realms may exist that are each progressively smaller than ours. These scaled up and scaled down universes would not evolve carbon-based humans and critters resembling us. Our physical matter, composed of the elementary particles, atoms, and molecules that we are familiar with, is nicely suited to our own scale and ill-suited to drastic changes in scale. However, that is not to say there could not exist enough weird stuff, totally unlike our matter, that has evolved forms and structures appropriate to its own scale that have enough complexity, memory, and processing power to evolve intelligent life forms. Why? Because Mother Nature is one aggressive babe. Why not? Because you do not have the capacity to conceive of it? Why would a rational person, who wasn't hopelessly optimistic about the completeness of their knowledge, believe that our personal and collective ignorance and limitations should logically constrain the possibilities of creation? Our contemporary objective knowledge base sets the limits on what we can collectively imagine, much less comprehend, and it is unlikely that our little picture science can ever hypothesize more than a minute fraction of the possibilities of creation. Regardless of how hard we try, all we can conjure up are various versions of ourselves because that is all we know. There is little point in speculating beyond the limits of your vision. Appreciating your inherent limitations and applying open-minded skepticism to your http://www.my-big-toe.com 282 My big toe infinity gets too big for real britches. Logical and scientific processes constitutes the only approach to exploring the big picture that makes sense and produces results. Any other approach will eventually lead you to paint yourself into a corner with broad strokes of belief and arrogance. We can barely comprehend, or even wildly imagine, only a very small slice of the potential 3D space-time possibilities for existence within our own 3D space-time, much less existences in other 3D space-times within other dimensions, much less existences outside 3D space-time but within NPMRN, much less existence outside of 1PMRN but within NPMR. Would the possible realms that lie beyond our comprehension be populated? Could they have evolved consciousness, critters, objects, energ, patterns or other structured stuff? No one says they, their matter, their environments, or their governing rule sets, physics, must necessarily be like us, our matter, our environment, or our rule set. In a digital consciousness reality, anything that can be conceived is possible. Anything with a rational structure, rule-based, and with enough potential and complexity will eventually evolve to a more highly organized, lower entropy, system of systems. We are not alone, reality is teeming with intelligent life forms. In fact, we humans and non-physical entities of OS are relatively minute, like one small school of fish in a gigantic ocean of sentient life. When you learn to move your awareness between dimensions, you will be amazed at the diversity of life forms that share our consciousness ecosystem. What difference does the existence of other reality systems make? Until one or more of these realities interact with your reality, the answer is none whatsoever. Absolutely none. It is a fact that OS is only one of many evolving reality systems, but this particular fact is of no practical importance. Your current task of reducing your entropy within the PMR Learning Lab. It may be nice to know that you are not alone, and interesting and educational to explore realms outside OS, however, such exploration can do little by itself to improve the quality of your consciousness. Activities that do not contribute significantly to the positive evolution of your consciousness are not important. The fundamental process of evolution combined with the potential of sufficiently complex digital systems to self-organize generates all the real ity that is within our capacity to comprehend. In contrast, our space-time universe and small blue planet represent only one special case application of that process. It is worth noting that the dynamic interaction of a simple evolutionary process with the fundamental energy of a self-organizing digital consciousness spawns individual sentium awareness, thinking. http://www.my8igto.com Book 1, Section 2, Chapter 33 I-283. Beings, through a multi-leveled self-generating progression of recursive process that is reminiscent of how a simple geometric relationship generates an enuicate fractal pattern. An interesting similarity, in both consciousness and fractal systems, each part of the pattern carries the blueprint of the whole. The critters and things of the Earth along with our beloved planet, solar system, and universe inhabit only that sliver of 3D space-time and non-physical reality that is appropriate for our kind and our purpose. Every reality evolves its own compatible systems and ecosystems. POMUEES do not grow on high mountain tops for similar reasons. The space-time rule set is only appropriate for a tiny subset of reality. Other rule sets define consistent causalities elsewhere that are unimaginable to the residents of PMR. Consciousness and evolution have few limits placed upon their combined creativity. If any system or subsystem is profitable, can lead to self-initiated entropy reduction, it probably exists. Why would you believe that reality systems like OS are the only ones likely to be profitable when your mind can comprehend no more than an infinitesimal subset of the possibilities? Do not let your beliefs and the limitations of your current knowledge limit your notion of what is possible. Letting your ignorance define the limits of an acceptable reality is bad science. Unfortunately, it is also the norm. That is why young scientists make most of the dramatic breakthroughs. When you believe that you know, but do not, you cut yourself off from the possibility of ever knowing. The knowledge that lies outside the possibilities allowed by your core beliefs is beyond your intellectual reach, a merely invisible to your self-limited vision. You simply cannot see beyond the walls you have constructed regardless of how hard you are trying to do exactly that, and no matter how strongly you believe that your vision is clear and unimpeded. To see a bigger picture, to view what lies beyond, you must first tear down the wall or at least some portion of it. Human cultures are little more than communities of shared belief where common belief blindness leads to erroneous conclusions that are universally held as obvious truth. Energy forms, matter and light for example, and physics within other reality niches, including other 30 space-time realms, may be vastly different from our PMR because each dimension of existence, separate reality, functions under its own rule set. Nature, the natural manifestations of evolution within each reality, 1. Tends low leave few empty places and has a way of evolving something, not necessarily carbon-based biology, low populate whatever can be populated. Even the environs around high temperature. 284 I my big toe I infinity gets too big for real britches. Thermal vents, under huge pressures and in total darkness at the bottom of the oceans, produce life. Not as we are used to perhaps, but life just the same. The fundamental evolutionary process seems to work everywhere. Life or conscious awareness or individuated subsystems of consciousness are merely the result of a purposeful, self-interacting complex system with memory, evolving its way through a large and diverse set of environmentally constrained possibilities. A complete set of the possible forms that sentient life could take are beyond our knowing. is one member of that set and we are another. Bacteria and flatworms are two more. Evolution produces light forms that are suited to their particular environment. That is how we and all the critters, including one-celled critters, and plants turned out as we are, we fit, are efficient and effective in, our environment. An environment beyond our imagination will evolve FON11s and functions beyond our imagination low suit itself. Everyone should agree that a digitally simulated interactive virtual reality has few intrinsic limitations. It is a generally accepted idea among scientists that if we, or at least something vaguely like what the Earth has produced, cannot exist, grow, and evolve within some postulated reality or host environment, then it is not possible for sentient life to flourish within such a place. The belief that any life forms that might exist out there must be similar to the life forms of Earth is a product of little picker thinking. Without a doubt, we have a very limited view from where and what we are and thus should be doubly careful not to constrain the possibilities we can grasp merely because we do not already know the answers. Such arrogance creates the walls of its own conceptual prison. Our PMR time appears to us to be continuous, non-granular or non-quantized, because the smallest times we can measure are vastly huge compared low one quanta of our time. You do not get the granularity in a slab of steel or a pane of glass unless you can measure distances down to the size of an urn or molecule. The glass, steel, or wood tabletop you set your drink on appears to be solid and continuous although we know it is made up of discrete tiny particles with vast regions of empty space between them. The granularity is imperceptible from the macro view. Time is the same way. From the macro view of our everyday experience, time appears to be continuous. You may find it profitable to visit this topic again after you have read chapters 9 and 10 of Book 3, where parallel probable universes are discussed. The bottom line is that all the time in all the past and present worlds that you might imagine is not a big deal for to track. In time. Book 1, Section 2, Chapter 33 I-285. As well as space, we see that apparently infinite, but actually finite, is much more than enough to accomplish everything we have laid at the feet of a real and a real TBC. It is reasonable to assume that AUM and TBC have multiple gazillions of margin, exua capacity, left over to grow into and play with. Although AUM is a big dude with a lot to do and keep track of, being infinite is not a prerequisite for the position. 34. Section 2 Postlude. Hail, hardy readers! Thou hast shown divine patience and great tenacity. I know it has been a wild ride and that you are wondering what to make of all these new concepts and ideas piled one upon the other upon the next like food on the plate of a teenage boy Alan all-you-can-eat junk food buff Ted. /v hacks worse, most readers probably have little experience that can help them evaluate the truth of what you have just read. That is the nature of big truth. It is either trivia obvious or totally opaque. There is no need to make judgments or jump to conclusions. Do not believe anything, for or against. Maintain an open mind and realize that you are only at the beginning of this journey. If everything made sense early on, it wouldn't be a particularly complex exposition and a trilogy would not be required. Because I am taking most of you on a trip far beyond your wildest musings, you should expect, this early in the unfolding, to feel somewhat ambivalent, lost, and, please, always skeptical. If you have little experience systematically exploring the larger reality of inner space, what you read here will no doubt seem abstruse, unsubstantiated and beyond K110 wing. It is not. It only seems that way from the perspective of your culture and your self-limited experience. Consider how a 5-year-old child, 01 your favorite pet critter, views and understands the larger what it lives in. Many things will seem absolutely beyond anyone's possible knowing when they are actually only out of sight of a limited vision and understanding. Believing that your vision is less limited than it actually is reflects. 288 My Big TOE Section 2 Postlude. A natural U8 of high entropy consciousness that is constrained to an individuated unit of independent action. Section 4 will clarify this concept. Although what you have read in Section 2 may seem remote from your sense of reality, it was necessary to introduce some of the basic ideas you will need to bring the big picture into focus. Everything will fit together more smoothly later on. If the discussion of the life and times of AUM was tough slogging and prompted you to yawn a few items of your own, take heart, this next section, Section 3, is all about you. Because it is about you, it is bound to be exceptionally interesting. How could it be otherwise? In Section 3, Man in the Loop, we will make the first tentative connections between all the weird off-the-wall concepts in Section 2 and what they could possibly have to do with you and your physical and mental reality. Think you will like this next section more than the previous one, because it will give you some things think about that you do have the experience evaluate and it will be less abstract. If you have made it this far and still have the desire and gumption to go on, award yourself 4 beautiful gold stars for your intellectual tenacity and inquisitiveness. Paste them inside the front cover of this book so that everyone will know that you are a dedicated, committed, serious seeker after something extraordinarily important even if you are not sure at this point exactly what it is. Book 2. Discovery. Section 3 Man in the Loop. How you fit into the big picture, ego, body, mind, and purpose. Section 4 Solving the mystery. Mind, matter, energy, and experience. Synopsis of Book 1. Book 1, Awakening, Section L provides a partial biography of the author that is pertinent to the subsequent creation of this trilogy. This brief look at the author's unique experience and credentials sheds light upon the origins of this extraordinary work. The unusual associations, circumstances, training, and research that eventually led to the creation of the My Big Picture Theo 1Y of Everything, My Big TOE, trilogy are described to provide a more accurate perspective of the whole. Book 1, Awakening, Section 2 lays out and defines the basic conceptual building blocks needed to construct My Big TOE's conceptual foundation. It discusses the cultural beliefs that trap our thinking into a narrow and limited conceptualization of reality, defines the basics of big picture epistemology and ontology, as well as examines the nature and practice of meditation. Most importantly, Section 2 defines and develops the two fundamental assumptions upon which this trilogy is based: a high NUOP primordial consciousness energy form called AUO, absolute unbounded oneness, and the fundamental process of evolution. AUO eventually evolves to become a much lower NUOP consciousness energy form called AUM, absolute unbounded manifold, even though neither is absolute or unbounded. Using only these two assumptions, Section 2 logically infers the nature of time, space, and consciousness, as well as describes the basic properties, purpose, and mechanics of our reality. Additionally, Section 2 develops the concepts of the big computer, TBC, and the even bigger computer, EBC, as operational models of aware digital consciousness. Our system, OS, is defined to be PMR, physical L/fatter reality, our physical universe, plus the subset of NPMRR, a specific part of non-physical matter reality, NPMR, LBAT is interactive with PMR. Many of the concept point 5 initiated in Section 2 are more fully explained in Book 2. http://www.my-big-toe.com. Section 3. Man in the Loop. How you fit into the big picture. Ego, body, mind, and purpose. 35. Introduction to Section 3. Rum evolved the space-time consciousness construct to provide us with the experience we need to help it lower its overall entropy. Is this not as crystal clear as the morning dew? If you do not understand this now, you will understand it clearly before you have completed Book 2. Before we get started, it might be a good idea to warm up first with a few mind stretches. Everybody take a deep breath. Here we go. Stay with me now. Try to hallucinate a spherical chicken, a very large spherical chicken, bigger, bigger, bigger. That's it. Now hold that concept, hold it, hold it. Now, this is the difficult part, pretend you understand it, that's it, make it seem perfectly understandable, perfectly reasonable, that's it. That's it. Now hold that clarity, hold it. Just a little longer, hold it, okay. Relax. Phew. That's better. Okay, now end with another 1 deep breath. That was great. I think you are as ready as you are going to get. Seriously folks, if you do not understand something, do not assume that it must be so or that it cannot be so, and do not pretend uncritically that you understand what is outside of your experience. Remember, open-minded skepticism is the order of the day. Use it to fill up the void left by temporarily suspending your beliefs. Alright, let's get back to work. LT is not that we are separate from space-time and live within it, as we live in a house but are not part of the house. We experience space-time as our minds interpret and process TL1E limited perceptions gathered by our senses. Contrary to popular belief, space-time is not a physical construct that we physical beings live within, but rather the result of a rule set that defines the experiential virtual reality that we perceive. Because of our limited physical perception-based experience, it appears to us that http://www.my-big-toe.com. 296 My Big Toe Introduction to Section 3. We live or exist within a space-time universe when in fact space-time is nothing more than the constraints that bound the experience of an individuated consciousness enrolled in PMR 101. I know that this is confusing, but by the end of Section 4, you will have no trouble understanding that the physical reality you physically experience is merely the experience our consciousness interprets as physical reality. If your sensed physical reality and what your consciousness interprets as physical reality seem the same to you, it is because your culture has convinced you that consciousness is a derivative of the physical body. TI1E experience that our senses interpret as physical reality leads to the conclusion that physical reality is an external reality that our body interacts with. Reality is defined by our physical interaction with it. On the other hand, the experience that our consciousness interprets as physical reality leads to the conclusion that physical reality is an internal reality created by the perceptions of consciousness, a virtual physical existence that is defined by our mind's interaction with the space-time rule set. The first assigns perception directly to the body, while the second assigns perception directly to the consciousness and only indirectly to a virtual body constrained to perceive a local reality defined by a given rule set. An individual mind, an individuated unit of consciousness, engaged in an interactive multiplayer virtual reality must experience, act, and interact within the bounds prescribed by the causal rule set that defines that particular reality. Any consistent high-fidelity virtual reality must follow a specific rule set and will appear to be physical to the individuals experiencing it. Clarity should emerge in Section 4 as you begin to understand that the ultimate source of your experience is not what you perceive as your local physical reality. Your physical reality is an interpreted virtual reality that only appears physical. Have patience and you shall see that this concept is scientifically and logically sound. Individuated consciousness within AUM is roughly analogous to a two-dimensional bed sheet that some children have stuck their hands into, pulling the sheet down around their wrists and forearms to make individuated hand puppets. Each hand puppet is an individual animated thing, and can interact with the other puppets, by grabbing them perhaps. Yet for all their individuality, fat, thin, small, large, aggressive, calm, each hand puppet is part of the same sheet, existing only as protrusions in the sheet relative to flatter, more uniform parts of the sheet. The puppets exist as three-dimensional variations in the two-dimensional sheet. They are all pan of same sheet, but exist as individual extensions of the two-dimensional shear into the third dimension. http://www.my8igto.com Book 2, Section 3, Chapter 35 I-297. LE is worth noting that the extensions into the third dimension must be maintained by constraint. Imagine a rubber band that goes over the puppet and around the wrist of the child's hand. Remove the constraint and the sheet's protrusion into the third dimension quickly disappears. The sheet maintains its natural two-dimensional existence unless some sort of constraint forces it to bulge in the third dimension. Similarly, we are physical beings, each with our personal individuated consciousness, are all part of the same AUM consciousness. We are individual, yet at the same time we are all one with AUM, the fundamental source consciousness. Our individual existence, like the hand puppets, is the result of constraints defining a dimensional variation in consciousness that individuates a unique entity with free will. Space-time is the virtual medium through which the rules of engagement, constraints that define our interactive experience with other players, are applied. Players are defined as anything, beings, objects, or energy, that may become interactive with us. Can one idea, thought thing, be manifested rough, give bent another? Sure. Why not? LNAUM's world of digital consciousness energy, thoughts, discrete packets of organized content, are real things, the only real things, and AUM can birth, think up or organize, as many as it wants to. Think of a thought within AUM as a reusable object, a chunk of fixed or variable content with certain attributes, characteristics, and abilities that can be stored, transmitted, or used as an operator. The object-oriented programmers among you will pick this idea up very easily, while the rest should think about the persistent, consistent, and cumulative digital existence of various characters, items, and devices in interactive online computer games. Now, imagine that some of these game object thought forms have enough complexity, memory, and access to processing power to be goal-seeking, self-modifying independent agents. Let your imagination run wild until you can imagine digital creations of all types, all thought forms within a digital consciousness. Recall that EVA's thing at its core is part of the same digital AUM mind sheet thing. If you followed the previous two paragraphs, you ended up with the concept that we are fragments, derivatives, or subsets of AUM consciousness, existing individually within AUM. Oh shit. This is confusing. This is your first test. Was the preceding phrase, A prayer to ALVL asking for guidance and relief, B a thinly veiled coarse expression of frustration born of a limited viewpoint, C a pitiful attempt at humor, D one more meaningless phrase indistinguishable from all the others, or E all of the above? http://www.my-big-toe.com 298 My Big Toe Introduction to Section 3. In Section 4, I will give a detailed explanation of how we derive, perceive, and experience our 3D bodies as well as our entire space-time universe. We, our universe, and other universes in other dimensions are all specialized thought parts or subsets of AUM. This is true for physical and non-physical beings and universes. Before we leap off into a discussion of how, why, and where we as individuals fit into this big picture, let us quickly pull together and consolidate what we know about AUO, AUM, and the results of the fundamental process. We know that AUM is the result of the fundamental process of evolution being applied to the one-celled, dimly aware, primal AUO consciousness potential energy thing. We also know that AUM's complexity and awareness continues to dramatically accelerate until it reaches a relatively stable average growth rate where issues of quality and refinement begin absorbing more of the available energy than bold new leaps into unknown and untried possibilities. From that point, internal quality is improved and gains are refined, integrated, and consolidated until the next evolutionary breakthrough occurs, setting off another period of rapid growth. Eventually, the growth rates of finite systems must decrease, the very definition of maturity, but they do not have to go to zero. In general, the larger the system, the longer it takes before growth rates become asymptotic to the time axis. An apparently infinite aware consciousness energy thing constitutes an exceedingly large finite system with unimaginable opportunities for accelerated growth. Do not even try to imagine the breadth, depth, and capacity of AUM. You cannot. Digital consciousness systems do not deteriorate with time like biological systems, though they can evolve, that is, evolve into higher entropy, less significant, profitable, and viable states. AUM achieves self-optimization and growth through the exploration of the possibilities by implementing the fundamental process. AUM can eventually figure out how to willfully boost its quality, lower its entropy by utilizing its potential and organizing its bits more effectively, once it realizes that profitability is a function of the intent that drives its choices. So it is //THUS. When you read AUM learns, do not use the small dash, EU definition of learning, intellectual learning. Learning is more than accumulating facts from your EI7, Aryan C, other people, or books. Big picture learning must also include improving the quality of your being, which is not a fact-based process. Have you ever known an exceptional, smart person, knows lots of useful facts, who is also, choose one or more from the following list, dumb, out of it, insensitive, egocentric, arrogant, or an intermittent or? http://www.my-big-toe.com 1. Book 2, Section 3, Chapter 35 I-299. Full-time jerk? If you have the stellar good fortune to hang out in the hallowed halls of academia, with the upper echelons of government or corporate management, or with a bunch of highly ambitious middle-aged professionals, you know exactly the type 1 I am referring to. Such a person appears more retarded than advanced from the perspective of a bigger picture where the ability to develop and maintain effective positive relationships with a wide variety of people is much more significant than the ability to manipulate facts. Clearly, growing up within a larger reality has much more to do with raising the quality of your consciousness than accumulating information. What matters most is the development of wisdom, understanding, and the capacity to love, which are not primarily intellectual achievements. As you grow up, you learn to synthesize your experience data into larger and larger perspectives until eventually everything is seen to be interactive, interrelated, and a part of everything else. The love I am referring to here is an attitude, a value, a way of interacting and being, and needs no specific object on which to focus. Thoughts and intellectual knowledge can help point in the right direction and perhaps pick around the edges of how to grow quality, but to usually get it requires that one go beyond rational PRVLR causal analysis. Analysis fads because you can never collect more than a small percentage of the relevant facts required for a rational, logical conclusion when dealing with big picture issues, and because love is not an intellectual pursuit. Love is the result of low entropy consciousness. AUO was described earlier as everything, the one source, and nothing, no actual individuated thing, simultaneously. AUO began its existence as an unstructured potential energy system analogous to a single biological cell floating in the primordial ooze. AUM is aware, active, and purposeful. An advanced aware consciousness. What an amazing transformation! You can thank the fundamental process of evolution, especially as it applies to consciousness, for that metamorphosis. As consciousness develops awareness, intelligence, values, and personality, its entropy shrinks as its ability to organize itself effectively and profitably increases. AUO represents the basis for consciousness, an energy form, a media for digital self-organization or awareness. AUO is a metaphor for a primordial dim awareness that evolved the capability to create differentiated cells, local non-uniformity, relative to its uniformity. It subsequently found it profitable to change the state of those cells as the fundamental process began optimizing imernal environmental interactions. As the complexity, potentiality, and possibilities grew, AUO's awareness evolved. http://www.my-big-toe.com 300 My Big Toe Introduction to Section 3. To include, specialized structure, memory, organization, complex content-laden communications between subsystems, brilliant self-awareness, and purpose. AUO naturally evolves, grows up, into AUM. Picturia UM as a geeky hygiene challenge at teenage computer freak with ugly red zits called PMRs. Do you think our universe might be a particularly nasty infection on the nose of a pubescent consciousness? I bet you have never thought of your reality in those terms before. A mystical eruption on the nostril of AUM. What a beautiful image. Sheer poetry. Of course, I am just kidding, we wouldn't be on AUM's nose. Speaking of getting popped, what does the zit theory of existence, or what is more affectionately referred to by cosmologists and cosmetologists as the pus a us reality concept, do for your ego's sense of humanity's special importance? Aha, one after all that polite jabber about petri dishes. The mysterious connection between humanity and bacteria rises to a head. A word of caution, this book is heavy, so be careful where you throw it. You might inadvertently hit an innocent bystander in the head, thereby warping his skull and his mind simultaneously. Take a deep breath and let it go. There is no saving throw against tasteless lowbrow humor. These days an eloquent book is as rare as a truly innocent bystander. The evolution of bright complex consciousness from dim awareness, does that seem unlikely? We carbon-based human life forms are reported to have done something like that ourselves, from one-celled dimly aware blobs of protoplasm to our present grand and elegant selves. Did I forget to mention magnificent, brilliant, and superior? And we are on slow time by 36 orders of magnitude compared to AUM. You, as part of AUM, are simply an individuated consciousness. I know. That may seem strange, but making this a reasonable proposition and explaining how it works is what sections 4 and 5 are all about. AUM is consciousness, thought, operational knowledge, idea, and awareness. Consciousness represents the most basic form of energy, a self-relational digital media that can be structured through evolutionary processes to reduce its average entropy. You are a portion, an infinitesimal smidgen, of this ALVF consciousness thing, and as such, you share the attributes and abilities of all consciousness. Because the capacity of your particular consciousness, Your personal evolutionary potential is great, so is your responsibility for its development and use. AUM, like any complex system, has evolved both structural and dynamic components. Its structural components are objectives, values, dimension, specialized calculation space, memory, and patterns, rules. Book 2, Section 3, Chapter 35I-30I. Its dynamic components are time, intent, motivation, intellect, and will. Value-based awareness, intelligence, and purpose are created, sustained, driven, animated, and motivated by the evolutionary imperative to improve the functionality of the system through better organization, entropy reduction. The imperative to implement the fundamental process is the prime mover of progress. VL is consciousness, as opposed W has consciousness, and it eventually acts, changes state, and evolves through the exercise of will or intent, self-aware consciousness in control of itself. If you really want to, for poetic reasons, or really need to, for reasons of emotional comfort, you may say that all things, our universe, all PMRs and NPMRs, and all the beings therein, are manifestations of AUM's will and made of AUM substance, self-configuring digital organization. You could also say that we brainy people, with our minds full of fully operational and original thoughts and ideas, are created in AUM's image, along with a varied collection of thoughtful dogs, cats, foxes, pigs, monkeys, and computers. Don't get lost here, I am talking about our minds, our consciousness, not our adorable little bodies. Now we can take one more fold in Olu bedsheet analogy. As before, AUM is the sheet, we and everything in our reality are the sheet hand puppets protruding into the space-time dimension, and the energy that animates the little fingers, hands, and arms is our individuated portion of AUM's conscious awareness, which is expressed through our individual free will. The sheet and its protruding DIN-1 engines are engaged in a program of continuous quality improvement administered by the fundamental process of evolution acting upon a multi-leveled consciousness evolution fractal ecosystem. By the end of Section 4 this will be clear. For now, merely entertain the possibility that our bodies and all the objective matter in our 3D world are the product ls of constrained consciousness and a rule-based virtual sense perception. Do not fall into habituated anthropomorphic concepts or you may start thinking of ALV as a person. Foot will be more productive to think of AUM as a thing, a complex consciousness system, a big cellular quantized thought energy thing that constitutes the one source of all that ours. Do not conceive of AUM as a superhuman intellect, yourself extrapolated to God-sized proportions and qualities. Resist the urge to turn AUM into an ancient-looking old geezer with a long white beard playing with his pet people, or all manner of silliness will mystically erupt from the Greer void. 302 My Big TOE Introduction to Section 3. Hey, I know, let's play God. I'll be the God, and you be the people. No way, Hosea. I wanna be the God one. I thought it up, it's my game and I wanna be the God first. Okay, I promise, next eternity you can be the God and I'll be the people. Oh, come on, it'll be fun. Tell you what, if you let me be the God this eternity I'll make you boss over all the critters and give you a woman that never goes out of heat. Deal? Is AUM's awareness intelligent and sentient? I would say so, but not in the same way that we are intelligent and sentient, not that limited. Is a baboon's awareness intelligent and sentient? Yes, but more limited than ours in most cases. Does AUM care? Does it take care of us? Aren't we its babies, so to speak? Good grief, one, don't get anthropomorphically silly on me here. Wipe that self-indulgent mist out of those puppy eyes. Do you care about the individual cells in your thumb or whether or not you are born with or without an appendix? Not really. Where we human types place our attention depends on the challenges of the fundamental process. Much of our energy is dedicated to our physical being, issues of survival and procreation. However, AUM does not have that distraction. Evolution for AUM is more of an up-close and personal take-charge sort of thing. Perhaps as we get better at genetic engineering and cloning we will get a dim glimmer of AUM's position relative to influencing its own evolution. Until then, it is best not to puff up our self-importance so much that it gets in the way of our ability to see the truth, whatever it might be. In the meantime, if lumpy consciousness sheets seem distressingly cold and impersonal as a source of our being, I have a practical solution. Anyone wanting a warm fuzzy relationship T11 at gushes unconditional love, which is focused individually on, and directly at, a needful, and oh, so, deserving you should, get a dog. Don't be confused by the forward and backward spelling thing, simply look for a genuine, guaranteed warm and fuzzy dog. Besides loving, dogs are straightforward, honest, faithful, loyal, and forgiving. They are seldom demanding, revengeful, jealous, angry, self-important, or into tier and dogma, egotistical. They will never ever tell you to go to hell. They are never rude or sassy and never forget to flush the toilet or to turn off the lights that they have turned on. They will not run up charges on you one credit card or dent your car. Better yet, they never drop their clothes on the floor and will never invite their mother to come. Book 2, Section 3, Chapter 35 I 303. Live with you. No dog has ever smoked a cigar or invited his friends over to drink beer and watch football on TV. Dogs are happy to exist on your leftovers and eat your garbage. That, ladies and gentlemen, is as warm and fuzzy as it gets if you are looking for a relationship that takes little to no effort on your part. That is what we are all looking for, isn't it? A no-fault, at least not ours, low-maintenance relationship in which we are unconditionally loved and forgiven because we exist and meet the basic superficial requirements. What could be better than that? That is what you truly want, right? No problema. Go get a dogl. If you maintain the letters in the right order, you will happily find that dogs deliver warm fuzzies all the time instead of only in relation to your needs, beliefs, and fears. And here is the best part, dog ownership never generates internal pressures that would lead you to be hypocritical or self-righteous. You can just be yourself. Your dog will love you however you are. Even if you are not nice to your dog and don't love it, it will still love and adore you above all other ones. LT5 love is widely spread, deeply sincere, and truly unconditional, a being worthy of your emulation, if not outright worship. Hey, what's with the firework, rope, and torches? Is this some sort of medieval pageant? Are we going to have a bonfire and toast marshmallows? Look, I agree with you. There are magnificent and endless sources of genuine spiritual warm fuzzies, but you have to work hard to grow up enough to access them. They are not easy, low maintenance, or superficial. They are not focused, even in a small way, on what you get for meeting requirements. Thal concept was spawned to support a membership drive. Ins lead, they are about your capacity to embody and apply, give, absolute unconditional love. Performing rituals and doing dogma doesn't gel it. Belief, pro or con, can, at best, generate a self-focused egocentric I feel good about myself, my faith, and my belief warm pseudo-fuzzy. If you ever get to know the real thing, you will never again settle for a pseudo-fuzzy. 36. Geez Louise, will that fat rat ever find the cheese? It is generally accepted, among humans, that we Homo sapiens have the most advanced intelligence and are the most thoughtful of all the Earth 11 creatures. Does that make us more AUM-like, closer to the source? Do you think that we must be AUM's favorite creation, or most amusing experiment? Humans are no doubt exceptionally clever. What other species could create no fewer than 11 entirely independent ways to destroy all life as we know it: nuclear bombs, global warming, toxic waste, pollution, and excessive non-ecological global resource consumption? Such creativity and awesome intelligence makes you feel proud, doesn't it? What's wrong we Ili Ilias picture? What term is missing from the human equation? Our species has always intuitively known Iliad. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing, we just never appreciated how dangerous for how little. We beings of limited 3D awareness, what you see is what you get, that is the beauty of us, and the opportunity of us. Our awareness limited, physical experience based, interactive human community excels at creating wonderful opportunities to grow the individual and collective quality of our consciousness. Limited awareness guarantees that our interaction within PMR accurately and immediately reflects the quality of our being. You have only low consider young children or your favorite furry critter to realize how a perspective that is limited to a relatively little picture produces transparent and straightforward interactions and reactions. For an individuated consciousness such as you, limited awareness produces learning opportunities within a relatively simple and straightforward interactive virtual environment with immediate results related feedback and consequences. 306 My big toe I's Louise, will that fat rat ever find the cheese? The complex, duplicitous, and anything but forward minds that we appear to have only look like that from a limited viewpoint where insignificant variations of fear and ego appear to be vastly more important than they actually are. The events that we wring our hands and gnash our teeth over day after day are typically drawn from the mishmash of trivial details that define our personal soap operas. What appears vitally important to us in the little picture of belief blindness and struggling egos is often completely inconsequential from a big picture perspective. You are aware in the little picture so that you may eventually grow your quality until it becomes capable of direct participation in the big picture. Aimlessly wandering about in a fear-based ego-driven little picture soap opera where you get to write your own script is not exactly on the fast you act to success. That you may be a good enough and lucky enough script writer to become rich and famous in PMR is irrelevant. In order to have a meaningful opportunity to do it right, you must also have the opportunity to do it wrong. From the perspective of the big picture, physical reality provides an optimal nursery for budding consciousness. The typical self-assessment of human mental complexity and cleverness is based on our self-serving species definition of elegance and cleverness as the ability to influence, manipulate, control, and dominate others, natural and man-made environments, plants, critters, other people, and everything else. That is why we clever humans develop and evolve most of our technologies and social systems around the needs of WA1 defense, trade, and communications, and why we have both accidentally and purposely generated multiple capacities to destroy the diverse life of our planet along with ourselves. Because of our needs, wants, desires, fears, ignorance, beliefs, and ego, lack of consciousness quality, we apply much of the mental energy of our species to issues of control and dominance, internationally, nationally, and personally. Cleverness, it seems, is primarily in the eye of the beholder. Nevertheless, we physical beings are, from the viewpoint of a less limited consciousness, exceedingly simple and straightforward. Our motivations, intentions, and interactions accurately and clearly demonstrate the quality of our consciousness in everything we do, say, think, and feel. A less limited consciousness finds our machinations within the physical to be transparent. Our quality, or lack thereof, is obvious, we cannot hide what we are. I have to ask what do your motivations and actions say about the quality of your consciousness? That is a good question. Low ponder, you. Book 2, Section 3, Chapter 36 I 307. Should paste that on the refrigerator door of your mind to remind you to ask it often, because, one day not that far off, you will need to deal with the answer. The results of our actitl 5, the environment we create, as well as the reactions of other people to us, provide immediate feedback to assess the quality of our intent. We create our reality through the implementation of our intent choices and how we interpret our perceptions. The results are most often precisely what we need and deserve, can use, to stimulate productive growth. In general, we do it wrong, make the wrong choices, we get pain. If we do it DGH4, the resultant spiritual growth spreads sunshine everywhere. Here, right and wrong are used in the evolutionary sense. Right and wrong in the evolutionary sense are the same as absolute right and wrong in the motivational sense when the fundamental process of evolution is focused on improving the quality of our consciousness. The previous sentence actually makes sense, but you may need to think about it a while. Relative right and wrong often has its roots in absolute right and wrong. However, the result may be strangely twisted by belief systems of all sorts, cultural, religious, personal, and scientific. All pain does not come from making the wrong choices. Only self-inflicted, internally caused, pain, which makes up the bulk of our daily ration of pain and suffering, has wrong choices at its fundamental source. You may occasionally experience either small or great pain from external sources. These usually reflect the existence of randomness within our lives. I will discuss the origin and nature of these random components in Chapter 11 of this book and in the next 2 sections. It is this simple: sometimes the ball takes a bounce and hits you squarely between the eyes, and sometimes the cookie crumbles into dust before you get to taste it. Or, in the PRTHY, if somewhat crude, words of the famous cinematic philosopher genius Forrest Gump, shit happens. External and internal causes of pain can be mixed and mingled together. However, most of us most of the time wrongly believe that our self-created pain is actually externally derived. That belief makes us feel better in the short run. We do not want to see ourselves as the primary source of our unhappiness and dissatisfaction, though that is almost always the truth. It is easier and more comfortable for us to believe that we are the victims of others, or simply are unlucky. Sometimes that is the case, but that condition is the rare exception rather than the general rule. The general rule is that most of the pain in your life is self-inflicted while very little is thrust upon you from the outside. We believe the opposite because an external enemy is always easier to accept and defeat than an internal one. It is easy to see how this rule applies to others, as it is difficult to see how it applies to oneself. 308 My big toe I geez Louise, will that fat rat ever find the cheese? Right and wrong in social or cultural sense is relative and customary, often a diluted and zero-root shadow of absolute right and wrong. Absolute right and wrong are operationally defined to optimize the growth, evolution, of the quality of our consciousness, or equivalently, our spiritual development. Right in 10L and choices help us improve the quality of our being, whereas wrong intents and choices stimulate NC positive growth and may cause us to lose some previously earned quality. Absolute right and wrong, intents, motivations, choices, and actions, are defined and differentiated by the effect they have on the average NUOP of the system. One can learn from either right or wrong choices. PMR is designed to serve as a learning lab, a place where units of individuated consciousness, sometimes referred to as beings, entities, or souls, can grow up, improve their quality, by exercising their free will intent within a virtual system of direct interactive experience and feedback. Many other subsets of NPMR are also configured as learning labs. Some employ versions of space-time while others do not. Each provides a local reality system for its inhabitant 5 who see themselves as physical and all other realities as non-physical. A reality systems are virtual, hence there is no actual distinction between real and virtual. Everything is consciousness, a vast system of self-modifying digital organization evolving toward lower entropy. Most of the time we are provided a near-optimal learning opportunity, by circumstances that we have custom designed to fit our individual needs. Moment by moment, with immediate and obvious results, these growth opportunities stare us in TL1E face or bop us between the eyes. Could any learning laboratory be more efficient than our beloved 3D spacetime? I doubt it. L1 knew what it was doing, evolutionarily speaking, that is, when it evolved, the concept of limited virtual physical realities. We are like rats in a maze where wrong turns meet with an immediate electrical shock. We are in a wonderfully complex pudding maze, to succeed, We must taste our way through it. What could be easy one or more efficient? We make the wrong choices and are motivated by the wrong reasons and zap. We get the electric shock and make ourselves miserable. We make the right choices for the right reasons and we create happy, productive, rewarding lives. We get the cheese. This is simple evolution where success is simultaneously its own criteria, evaluation, and reward. Consciousness is in the process of evolving its way through an evolution. A maze of intent, choice, interaction, and reaction. I should point out a few basic facts about evolving the quality of your consciousness in our reality. Although the results of your actions, feedback. Book 2, Section 3, Chapter 36 I 309. Are immediate and obvious, you can ignore them or misinterpret them if your ego is making too big a fuss. Then, it may take a while before the situation degenerates to the point where the resulting dysfunction becomes impossible to ignore or excuse. As in all learning situations, being attentive, paying attention in class, is absolutely essential to an efficient learning process. Don't ask for an easier maze, you won't get one. For those who typically slip through demanding situations by avoiding the things that are most difficult, let me point out that there are absolutely no shortcuts, no end runs, no acceptable excuses, and no way to quit. That anthropomorphized little old man with the long white beard that you can hustle favors from by believing the correct things and performing the correct rituals is a product of your little picture culture and a fearful, needy mind looking for the easy way out. 101 is handing out judgments and calling the plays from the sidelines. Not even a non-anthropomorphic thought system thing is likely to be paying attention to any particular individual human bacterium in the PMR petri dish. Humanity, as you know it and think of it, is not central to the machinations of the big picture. You should be proud to be a bit player, not disappointed because you are not the star. As far as I can tell, no reality or dimension is more central than the others. All are bit players, or equivalently, all are stars, playing their specific parts. Only a fat ugly ego could care a flip about the relative importance of Earth-based humans. The relative value and comparative status of our species holds no meaning for an advanced consciousness such as yours said, but you wouldn't believe how many other folks think that humanity is the creme de la creme of sentient existence. These egotists can become deflated, resistive, and defensive when you tell them that, in the big picture, they are not particularly imponent. When you are used to being fantastically magnificent and superior, a legend in your own mind, it is difficult to see yourself as a common bit player in a much larger drama. The process of improving the quality of your consciousness is a matter of simple evolution, much easier than a fish learning to walk on land and breathe air. Live and learn, do and die. If at first you don't succeed, try again, you know the drill. Take your place alongside the other sentient chunks of individuated digital consciousness, both physical and non-physical. Neither you, nor your species, nor your local reality is more important, special, or superior relative to the gazillions of others. Feelings of superiority developed in relation to other obviously inferior PMR beings and life forms, mankind is above all other creatures of the earth, is an error of perception that has generated many particularly. 310 I my big toe geez Louise, will that fat rat ever find the cheese? Destructive belief systems and caused much damage low biosphere Earth, as well as greatly retarded individual human progress toward greater consciousness quality. Because consciousness is an attribute of individuals, all conscious entities are vitally important in their own way, each has its own mission and purpose and is an important contributor to the whole. All are different, all have their own challenges, and none is fundamentally superior or inferior. Think of consciousness within NPMRN as a vast interdependent evolving ecosystem. Any part feeling superior to any other part is the result of ignorance, biliet, and ego existing within a little picture perspective. Actions motivated by feelings of superiority are bound to lead to destructive results for all members of the larger system, including those feeling superior. How superior is it to shoot oneself in the foot over and over again? Now that you are feeling sufficiently humble, let me continue using the ecosystem metaphor to show you the other side of this coin. Within the larger eco-mind system designed to evolve consciousness quality, PMR can be thought of as a particular biome. Consciousness ecosystems are not based on the evolutionary pressures of mutual survival and propagation, but evolve low improve themselves, to lower their entropy. Where survival and propagation represent predominate environmental constraints, individuals are not as important, in terms of evolution as are the groups they belong to. In biological evolution, superior individuals either impact a larger species-level profitability statistic, or their potential contribution is lost. An individual's impact on the success of an established species is nearly infinitesimal. Progress accrues through a large number of very small individual contributions that all point in a similar direction. In biological systems, it is the continuous immortal group, not the discontinuous mortal individual, that is the primary beneficiary of evolution. Within a consciousness system such as NPMRN, individual immortal conscious entities continuously evolve and contribute gains in their personal consciousness quality, lowered entropy, directly to the whole of which they are a continuing part. A single conscious entity has the potential to make a very significant, direct, and wholly independent contribution to the larger consciousness ecosystem as it seeks profitability on a personal level. As each individuated consciousness evolves, the larger consciousness system, AUM, evolves as well. Survival-based interdependencies between groups and the evolution of species within PMR is replaced by personal growth and the evolution of individual consciousness within NPMR. That is how you can be one of a gazillion entities in some experimental consciousness petri dish and at the same time be individually very important too. Book 2, Section 3, Chapter 36 I 311. The whole. Your personal contribution is not limited by a group function or a slow uncertain pass-along process with strong random components, it is simply measured by the quality that your consciousness brings to the table. Quality runs the gamut from the severely limited, high entropy, fear-based, self-serving ego, to the unlimited, low entropy, unconditional love exhibited by AUM consciousness. As you move from the former to the latter, your personal significance relative to the whole increases dramatically. Thought of an brilliant bacteria must remain in its petri dish as a part of its group. An evolved consciousness can outgrow the culture within its originally assigned petri dish and one day join the laboratory staff. You are an independent, with free will individuated consciousness containing the potential of AUM, no individual, species, or group affiliations can help or hinder your effort to become a more significant entity. Thus, feeling superior about your group affiliation, galaxy, planet, species, race, culture, religion, nation, profession, education, or socio-economic status, is simply counterproductive. In an aside near the end of chapter 20 of this book, I will explain why it is that a highly evolved, low-entropy consciousness has no sense of superiority. In the big picture, the quality of your consciousness determines whether you are of infinitesimal or great stature, of minor or major consequence to the whole, have a job in the lab, or are wallowing around cluelessly in the petri dish. Implement the fundamental principles. Make each choice count. Get with the program. Evolve your being. You are doing it now and you have no choice. You exist, you are an individuated consciousness and you cannot stop existing. Your physical death initiates a process that eventually creates a new maze for you to explore. Your learning is cumulative. You are one a participant in, as well as a driver of, the consciousness cycle. You are in the game whether you want to be or not. Every day you are evolving more toward the positive or negative pole of being. You cannot stay neutral or remain stationary. Denial and ignorance are inconsequential and affect nothing. Your permission or willingness to be involved is completely irrelevant. You are in the process of actively evolving your consciousness now. You are doing ILFO1 better or for worse. The only questions are how well and how efficiently are you doing it? Are you progressing or regressing, and if so, how steadily and at what rate? Is your growth process efficient? Is your learning rate optimal? Shock or cheese? Geez Louise, that's a tough one, let me think about it. You can be confused and non-productive, perhaps fail, if, 1. You do not understand the game and therefore do not know that your reality is actually an amazing maze of many choices that is driving the evolution of your consciousness, therefore remaining purposeless, pointless, and without focus, nol even trying. 2. Your taste buds are soul-twisted and confused. 312 my big toe geez Louise, will that fat rat ever find the cheese? Because of beliefs, self-absorption, attachments, needs, and fears, ego, that you cannot, or you not, taste the difference between miserable, arrogant, unproductive pudding, and loving, growth-inducing, delicious and satisfying pudding. In other words, you cannot differentiate between electric shocks and fine white cheddar cheese. You therefore lose your sense of direction and have no means to distinguish up from down, dark from light, or progress from regression. If an individual rat in the maze sees no point in exploring and cannot differentiate between electrical shocks and cheese, it is in for a long and difficult training experience. Poor rat. What a miserably frustrating light. Not much progress is expected. Shocks become an ordinary accepted part of light and are no big deal. That's life, says this rat with resignation. To this particular rat, the world, light within its local reality, may seem random, existential, nihilistic, mystical, or driven by an unfathomable, jealous, vengeful, or demanding God. To a collection of such rats, cynicism, self-pity, anger, victimhood, resignation, escapism, recreational drug use, as well as a fascination and obsession with sex and the symbols of power, including vicarious violence and domination through entertainment, competition and sport, conspicuous consumption, macho vehicles and aggressive driving, and the ownership of weapons, become common personal strategies to deal with the anxiety, inadequacy, insecurity, and powerlessness, generated by fear. Value, purpose, objectives, and goals of being are lost in a confusing whirl of fine shades of relative, meaningless gray, whige the original concepts of black and white are lost. These hapless rats will be driven and animated by their ego, their immediate needs, wants, desires, fears, and beliefs. Does this description, driven and animated by immediate needs, wants, desires, fears, and beliefs, remind you of anyone you know, a distant acquaintance, a least favorite relative, or perhaps your evil twin? You might be tempted to surmise that these rats are obviously too dumb to play the game and that it is cruel and unusual punishment to put these stupid, lost, and confused creatures in such a complex maze in the first place. Unfortunately, evolution shows little compassion and weeps no tears for its failures or slow learners. Goodbye dodo birds, adios dinosaurs, so long trilobites. Your concept of fairness is a function of your ego and belief systems and mostly irrelevant. Reasons and excuses for not making it or getting it fall on the deaf ears of the fundamental process of evolution. Making it and getting it, within your given set of possible interactions, are the non-negotiable requirements of evolutionary progress. An evolving system is either unprofitable. Book 2, Section 3, Chapter 36 I 313. Say goodbye if chat condition is not turned around in time, profitable, progress is being made, or neither, an astable condition that is hanging around waiting to see which way it will go. Cruel and unusual? Too difficult. Do you sometimes feel that unreasonable conditions for growth are forced upon you? Sure, like bad weather at a picnic is forced upon you by mean old Mother Nature. The fundamental process, as it applies itself to an individuated consciousness, is not personal regardless of how helpless resignation, ego, anger, paranoia, cynicism, or self-pity might construe it. If you think it is personal, you are probably placing yourself too high up on the consciousness chain. Bacteria are extremely important to us, Our IDE depends on them, but what we do that affects bacteria is usually not intended to be a personal affront or reward to any individual bacterium. I am describing the general case. There are always exceptions, but they are much, much fewer than a TOE would indicate. Nevertheless, evolution is patient. Patient enough to let that rat suffer in confused discomfort until it eventually progresses its awareness and ambition the point it can evolve a solution. The rat has free will and some basic intelligence, while evolution has all the time in the world. This rat is on its own to sink or swim by its choices. It does have one advantage, however: it gets, as most rats do, all the help it can profitably use from its non-physical friends who do care and understand the significance of individual progress. A simplistic view that confuses the local reality of our system with the large one reality of AUM holds that since some rats do figure it out, and because those that do are strongly encouraged to help out the remaining rats, eventually all the rats will make it. A universal high-quality consciousness, a heavenly vision of ubiquitous love, peace, and light, is believed to be the inescapable final result of consciousness evolution in Ralville. The only questions that would remain in such an experiment are the details defining the path taken to connect the endpoints, and how long it will take. For a grand experiment in consciousness, this is much too narrowly focused, scientifically shallow, and of dubious value to the larger reality of AUM. To make the experiment truly useful and productive, the evolutionary process must be more challenging and have an open-ended result. To optimize the consciousness cycle and learn more about the dynamics of consciousness, add to this learning laboratory the intrigue of bits of poisoned cheese and a myriad of clever distract ions and confusion scattered throughout the maze by a competing group of ANSI rats. 314 my big toe Gs Louise, will that fat rat ever find the cheese? Now the rats have a new set of options. To the struggle between ignorance, fear, and ego versus knowledge, wisdom, and love, is added the struggle between good and evil, between positive and negative intent. Now it is no longer clear that all the rats will eventually make it. No, this is not the equivalent of an adolescent ALVL putting two big spiders in a glass jar to see what happens. Free will requires that negative intent be a possibility, and without free will, there can be no experiment. There is no point in doing experiments if the outcome is predetermined. Maximum free will enables maximum potential for both success and failure. Like any scientist, after AUM has completed the simpler experiments, it must move on to the more difficult and meaningful ones. You will find a derivation of free will and its relationship to our consciousness in Chapter 11 of this book. Evolution may simply want to know whether rats or anti-rats are the natural winners of this experiment. AUM may want to determine the dynamics of the quality and evolution of consciousness under various conditions. VVE require the stress and challenge in order to exercise our free will fully and thus optimize our potential growth. Go rats go! Go rats go! Go rats go! Don't you want to join our team, we are the good guys, and help us out? Or do you just want to wear the t-shirt? For goodness sake, don't consider joining the bad guys, they are a miserable lot, and their benefits package stinks. You will eventually choose sides, everybody must. 101 can refuse to play because in this game no choice becomes an active choice, eventual leading, by circumstance, toward one direction or the other. FNTE1 staying experiment, It is my best hope that some hard-working rat will find a useful hint or secret map somewhere in this trilogy that will make a difference for him or her in the pursuit of their personal cheese. 37. Cheer up, things are not as bleak as you might think. Say cheese please, and hold that smile. The situation is neither hopeless, nor random, nor beyond your control. It is not even that difficult. Let's talk a moment about free will and making choices. What we do is not of primary importance, why we do it is what counts. The intent or motivation is the choice. Thus, our free will choices are primarily choices of motivation and intent, why we do what we do. Only secondarily are they choices of doing. What we can one ally do, the action we take, is the first result of our choice of intent, and drives a feedback mechanism, which is VE1Y good but not perfect, particularly in the short term. This is not biological evolution we are talking about, where the key process driver is what you do. And the evolution of consciousness, motivation and intent are the key drivers of evolutionary process. What you do is secondary to why you do it. The right choice for the wrong reason is an oxymoron and does not exist. I am being tricky-picky here with the semantics to make the point chat the development or selection of the intent is the choice thou lam referring to. Recall that right motivation, intent, and action generally result in a decrease of entropy within your consciousness, whereas wrong motivation, intent, and action generally result in an increase of entropy within your consciousness. This is how absolute right and wrong are defined. Right and wrong are differentiated by how they affect your spiritual quality, or equivalently, the quality of your consciousness. Relative, local, right and wrong are largely derived from our sense of absolute right and 316 my big toe I cheer up, things are not as bleak as you might think. Wrong, but a 1e also dependent upon fad, fashion, culture, and personal, social, and political circumstances. My big toe, being science, is only concerned with absolute right and wrong, where an entropy measurement, rather than a personal PMR viewpoint, determines which is which. Unvarying absolute right and wrong may appear to be dependent upon the extent of each individual's quality and thus relative to the individual. However, the process of entropy reduction is the same for all individuated consciousness, you, me, rover, and absolute right and wrong consistently apply to everyone all the time. Your ability to express big truth within your life by making right choices based upon right intent depends upon the quality of your consciousness. You gain personal quality the same way you gain strength and endurance or learn to play the piano, by dedication and continual effort applied over a significant period of time. We call this self-teaching incremental self-improvement process bootstrapping. You may employ a coach to improve technique and clarify issues, but only you can accomplish self-improvement. If the intent is wrong, then, by definition, the choice, of motivation, not of action, is wrong as seen from the perspective of evolving consciousness. The wrong intent or choice is evolutionarily wrong even if it temporarily results in what appears to be a constructive right action in physical biological space. You do not evolve higher quality consciousness through right action or right result, but only through right motivation and right intent. The PMR virtual reality consciousness trainer provides the opportunity for simple, straightforward interaction and a results-oriented feedback mechanism that reflects immediate and cumulative quality of intent. Motivation, intent, action, and feedback are all interconnected. Right motivation and right intent are the only sure path to zero right action, which produces the right feedback to encourage continued right growth and learning. Right growth and right learning are technically defined as growth or learning that leads to a decrease in the entropy of your consciousness. Personal growth, growing the quality of your being, or growing wisdom, all increase your personal power as they decrease the entropy of your consciousness. I am talking about the growing up and maturing of your being. A process that increases your capacity to love. I am also talking about spiritual growth, the evolution of your soul. Choose the expression that suits you, they are all essentially equivalent. There are three distinct parts here: 1. Choice of IMEM, 2. Action, which is a result of intent, what we do, and 3. Result, which is the effect of what we do. You should be careful not confuse action, the animation of your http://www.my-big-toe.com L. Book 2, Section 3, Chapter 37 I-317. Imant, with end result, the effect of your intent. Exercising free will interactions, with self or others, produces an internal result, always, and an external result, usually. The internal result immediately and most potently affect the quality of the consciousness according to the quality of the intent. The external result affects others as well as yourself and generates the appropriate feedback or reaction. Thus, it is not possible to achieve a right result if the intent is wrong. A wrong intent damages its creator despite what else happens. What would appear to be right action in the service of wrong intent is even mally revealed as self-destructive for the doer and as a challenging opportunity to whomever or whatever the doing is directed toward. Yes, I am exploring exceptions within the margins of typical behavior. The wrong intent cannot consistently and broadly result in right action. The partially random interaction of our free will consciousness with the free will of authors forces us to constantly make choices that express our intent or motivation, and then we act accordingly. Good motivation usually produces mostly right action. Perfect motivation always produces right action. Your grounding in, or familiarity with, PMR may lead you to believe TL1 at action is the evolutionary driver. IL is not, at least not for consciousness. Action is a primary drive one for physical biological systems only. Right and wrong choices are not made randomly. We are not randomly buffeted souls driven to and fro by external forces like particles exhibiting Brownian motion. Our specific individual opportunities may be derived through a series of Brownian-like social and personal collisions, interactions, that can contain large random components. Nevertheless, our overall opportunity to learn what we need to learn and the choices we make in actualizing that learning opportunity generally contain only small amounts of randomness. Indeed, at our elementary level of development, most choices are easily predictable. The interactions we have with others, and with the whole of reality, inundate us with the opportunity to make choices that flow from our intent and thus reflect the quality of our consciousness. If our intent is wrong, we suffer the consequences, in all realities we function in, irrespective of what we actually do. If our intent is right, we always derive some benefit, regardless of what we do as a result of that right intent. Right intent almost always drives a resultant right action. Wrong intent usually drives wrong action. Action creates results, which often create feedback, which sometimes, if we are paying attention, helps us modify our intents. External results drive our external feedback system of rewards and punishments, an imperfect system that is usually efficient. Fortunately, imperfections and 318 my big toe cheer up, things are not as bleak as you might think. Errors in the feedback system show up much more often in the short term than the long term. Internal results drive an internal feedback mechanism that either increments or decrements the quality of our consciousness according to the quality, rightness, of the original intent. The collect benefits and liabilities that accrue to us as a result of our actions help us recognize and understand the rightness or wrongness as well as the impact of intents and actions, thus facilitating our learning and guiding our future choices. All we need to do is be serious students committed to making good grades and take advantage of the learning opportunities that present themselves. What else is new? The same formula works everywhere: learning is learning. The only complication is that you also have a cut up in your classroom, your ego, that makes it difficult for you to hear or understand the lesson. For the T.J.I. being out there in the larger reality, continually choosing and doing, like you and me, intent lies primarily beneath the surface of one's awareness. What motivates us is barely visible to our intellect. Motivations and intent are a complex mixture of many, sometimes inconsistent and incompatible, components. Your motivations, reflecting your ego, are as Byzantine and inconsistent as you are. Nevertheless, for the typical human quality of consciousness, the benefits, spiritual growth, of right intent are usually much greater than the costs, spiritual stagnation or backsliding, of wrong intent. The spiritual impact of actions can simultaneously gain some and lose some in consciousness quality because the impact of feedback on future intent can produce a very complex result. Actions can often lose the same spiritual capital repetitively, only lo have it reappear as an investment in winning. I know the economists, investment advisors, and stockbrokers are terribly confused by the preceding sentence. For the financial and investment types, here is a longer, less poetical version. It is possible in many situations for you to make the same or similar mistakes repetitively without necessarily going broke, seriously impoverishing your consciousness quality. You simply do not get ahead. Furthermore, you're growing up because we mule-headed humans sometimes need to be hit repeatedly and barred directly between the eyes by the results of our NORs before we notice that a problem exists. Unfortunately, our egos are so good at blaming others that even after great suffering we often miss the point that our pain is primarily self-inflicted and trying to tell us something about what we are doing wrong. Book 2, Section 3, Chapter 37 I 319. Growth and making choices often appear to be extremely complex processes because from our point of view we are complex beings with complex egos existing somewhere between the often confusing opposites of good and evil, love and fear. Right being, profitable intent, and good choices tremendously easy, simple and straightforward without ego, and with the humility and compassion that comes with love. Changing the quality of consciousness is not, cannot be modeled by, or accurately approximated by, a simple linear process. Some people, usually precise types, tend to want everything to be reducible to a simple linear process so that they can work with it and more easily pretend that they understand it. These individuals often make assumptions to force-fit the problem at hand into a simple linear model. These assumptions inevitably lead those apparently precise and logical minds into erroneous conclusions. I know this is not a problem of yours, but Jay thought I would mention it in the event you know of somebody to whom it might apply. The choices you make, the motivations you have, are mostly not completely right or completely wrong. They are a mixed bag of many colors and components. The results of these mixed choices are also mixed. If right means 100% right, and wrong means not right, the average person makes many more wrong choices than right ones, but gets more gain from an almost right one than loss from a so-so wrong one. Most beings, people included, are steadily making positive progress, but ever so slowly. Consciously knowing what you are doing, and making an eyes-open honest effort can increase the rate of progress immensely. A little help in finding the bigger picture can make a significant difference. The optimal growth process is uniquely specific to each individual at a given time. If you are feeling perplexed and overwhelmed, wipe that frown off your face and throw that heavy resignation, along with that deep sigh, into the trash bin. Shake off any self-pity, and notions that you don't want to play the game. Things are not bleak at LLL. Go get Tiger Rat. 38. Does the big dude have an attitude? Do we? Speculate. Speculate. Dance to the music. Ars previously pointed out, if AUM has limits, and is aware of them, it must set priorities, make judgments, pace itself, focus only on what is most significant, and use its JJ-minded resources wisely for maximum self-improvement. If AUM is finite, could there be others? Sure, why not? Evolution tends to explore all the possibilities, but it doesn't make any difference to us or to our reality. From our tiny perspective, AUM, in all ways, appears to be infinite. Such questions, multiple AUMs, are totally pointless from a practical viewpoint and almost pointless from a philosophical viewpoint. If you are interested in speculation, you will find acres of fertile ground here. Go amuse yourself. Have fun dancing the philosophy boogie with your intellect, but don't take yourself or your brilliant choreography too seriously. Once you have gone far beyond your ability to comprehend what you are saying, it is time to either find the humor in it, or be quiet. Focus on what is small enough for you to grasp and work your way up carefully with a firm understanding of your limitations. Let go of what is too big for you to grasp. Accepting that your reality is dramatically affected by systems and phenomena that lie beyond your capability to understand and control is the first step toward developing wisdom. Differentiating these unknowables from those things that are within your potential to comprehend is the second step. Conceptual structures and a probing intellect are valuable T0Os, however, cramming unlived and unlpe1 ontological conceptual structures into yo intellect squanders enthusiasm and 322 I my big toe I does the big dude have an attitude? Do we? Interest makes you believe that you know and understand more than you do, and leaves you with no significant increase in spiritual quality. The condition and details of AUM's interaction with anything other than itself are speculatively interesting but unnecessary to, and totally beyond, our reality model and theory of everything. Fortunately, absolutely everything that can possibly affect us directly can be fully contained within a highly limited set. What is external to AUM that affects us indirectly is beyond our theoretical knowing. Similarly, speculation about how focused AUM is on us, how intelligent it is, how much it cares, if at all, whether it is emotional or more computer-like are totally superfluous to our understanding of everything. Our particular PMR could be either relatively insignificant or the main focus of AUM's existence. It could be one of many interesting experiments in consciousness or a unique implementation of the consciousness cycle. However, AUM's viewpoint makes absolutely no difference to our understanding of the large reality. Knowledge of AUM's opinion of us contributes nothing significant to the understanding of our system of reality or to the mechanics of existence. Only an ego could care about relative comparisons, hierarchy, and pecking order. Issues of ego are counterproductive to both science and self-improvement. Our anthropomorphic tendencies and sense of self-importance, supported by an unbounded egocentric pride in our species, makes me suspicious of any logic that puts us too close to the center of big-picture significance. We Homo sapiens are exceedingly impressed by our apparent significance and grossly inflated with self-importance, an unfortunate fact that clouds the clarity of our vision immensely. How many of our wars, atrocities, and general acts of meanness have sprung from a sense of superiority? A belief in the supreme importance of humankind is the ultimate source of much mischief. The notion that humans are inherently superior leads to the idea that some humans are superior to, or more significant than, others, a concept that represents the first step down a slippery slope that is both steep and long. The cultural, personal, and religious belief systems in which we are all constantly immersed have a tendency to be feel-good belief systems that boost our egos and self-importance, hence, their popularity. The feel-bad stick serves as the foil to the feel-good carrot. Besides helping us feel important, safe, and valued, if not superior, feel-good beliefs make it almost impossible for us to evaluate a bigger picture that refuses to manipulate the individual to feel good, important, safe, secure, saved, or feel bad, guilty, inadequate, unworthy, helpless, or fearful. To those needy individuals who are addicted to the medications of or feel-good beliefs and reality concepts without emotional hooks are like cigarettes without nicotine. Book 2, Section 3, Chapter 38 I 323. Emotional hooks are used to capture and manipulate needy egos, those who feel fear, those who feel lost and powerless, who feel inadequate, helpless, and insecure or feel as if they are not doing what they should be doing. Feel-good beliefs cover up these fears and help you feel strong, in charge, and powerful, feel as if you belong, are accepted and understood, feel loved, safe, and cared for. Wow, that sure sounds good to me. Where can I get a few of those feel-good belief pills? Not for myself, of course, but I have this friend who has a bona fide medical need for something exactly like this. Say, what's the long-term price for these happy hallucinations? Are you sure this is legal? Emotive manipulations of all sorts work like this: feel bad, ignorance, guilt, or innate quasi, usually precedes, and subsequently is interspersed with, feel good, importance, significance, security, salvation, redemption, acceptance, forgiveness, or superiority, in a succession of 1-2 punches that appeal to the needy ego, the good cop, bad cop routine. It is an unfortunate fact that feel-good belief systems rule the land, often subtly without being noticed. For this reason I am constantly making an effort throughout the My Big Toe trilogy to steer you away from falling into this common conceptual error by belittling our culturally ingrained self-satisfying importance at every turn. My weapon in this battle is blunt humor, no cynicism is ever implied or intended. A few readers, if caught on a bad day, may have difficulty dealing with the relative humble position we most likely occupy in the big scheme of things. Some may feel emotionally upset or angered by what they wrongly interpret as an implied lack of personal importance. Like bacteria, we are important in our own way and should be able to feel good without feeling superior. Being a small part of something very large does not have to be a downer, it depends entirely on your perspective. Only an erroneous belief system and your ego can possibly create a downer. I am by nature a cheerful, happy, upbeat type. I think people, reality, and life are a blast, an exciting ride, a wonderful opportunity. Find the humor, read and smile, let go, laugh a little, no need to be overly serious. Every now and then open up the top of your head so that fresh ideas can blow away the musty odor of old paradigms and force traditions and the status quo to periodically re-justify their value. Nothing encourages humor more than honest introspection. This life is your opportunity. The initial conditions of your PMR existence have been custom designed for you to optimize your growth potential, with your input and approval. Your personal growth is for fun and profit. Enjoy. Learning and joy go together. Not learning, not growing, and pain and misery go together. Most lives are a mixture of both. Focused effort and paying attention in the PMR Learning Lab can dramatically increase the ratio of joy to misery in your life. If you learn and grow significantly, your joy and knowledge will spill over into the lives of others. 324 My Big Toe Does the big dude have an attitude? Do we? Anything sentient that is important to us inevitably gets recast in our image. OUJ assessment of ourselves defines the scale against which all authors are measured and interpreted. We judge and assess others by comparing them to ourselves. We constantly project our being, our quality, onto the sentient existence of others. There is nothing we can objectively do, and a wrong answer, for some reason, always seems far superior to admitting ignorance. It is how we are, accordingly, be on guard. How does AUM regard us? Do I care about the cells in my stomach? Sure, but sometimes more than others, even though they are always important. I do not consider or deal with them individually or even in small groups unless I get an ulcer or a perforation. Do the cells in my stomach care about the pH of the secreted hydrochloric acid? Absolutely, each individual stomach cell dearly cares about the pH of the acid and the feedback mechanisms that regulate it. Do the cells in my stomach care about the style of my haircut? Not directly, although indirectly there may be a connection. If my new haircut style makes me feel good about myself and thereby reduces my overall level of stress, and perhaps helps me find a steady job and a girlfriend who can cook, my stomach is pleased with the results even if it does not understand the concept of haircuts, much less the complex interaction connecting haircuts, stress, jobs, girlfriends, and stomach acid. See how everything is important and related? Do the stomach see us or the acid one-egulating mechanisms feel slighted because they are not considered to be the center of the body? Do we in general worry much about how our bodies, minds, or spirits are evolving? Often, with some notable exceptions. Every being is interested in, aware of, and cares about what it interacts with on its own local level, and in its immediate environment. Everything is invisible or inconsequential because it lies outside the being's awareness, is hopelessly beyond its knowing, mystical, or appears to be irrelevant to its needs. With our capable minds we can and should do better than that. If our focus expands, it usually expands upward toward higher levels of awareness. Lower levels are taken for granted. They just are, they do what they do. We depend on them but do not get directly involved unless they get our attention by doing something unusual. Even if we are experimenting with bacteria in a petri dish, we leave them alone to do whatever they do. We don't name each bacterium and take them out to lunch on their birthdays, even if the experiment is important. Meddling, if not carefully restricted and precisely controlled, would invalidate the experiment. Book 2, Section 3, Chapter 38 I 325. Then what? The experimenter would have to flush the little fellows down the drain and start over. Uh-oh. Consciousness evolution is most likely a more immediate, aware, and up-dose and personal type of experience for AUM than biological evolution is for us. On the other hand, we are a part of AOIV's personal evolutionary process. A full-fledged members of the consciousness cycle, we are dearly significant. How Eve 1, speculation about AUM's attitude, just how significant we are, is of little value and will almost certainly be influenced by expressions of our anthropomorphic tendencies and self-important attitudes. AUM's attitudes and feelings toward OS, PMR, humanity, or any particular human or group of humans are beyond the scope of even the biggest big toe, because they are beyond our capacity to comprehend and irrelevant to everything that is of either practical or theoretical significance to us. How does AUM regard us? It doesn't make any difference. It is an irrelevant question that is meaningful only to the ego of the asker. AUM does what AUM does for its own reasons, and we do what we do for our own reasons. After that, the chips fall where they may. Accept it, and let it go. Answering such ego issues with systems of belief and pseudo-knowledge constitutes a giant step backward that inadvertently creates barriers that must be overcome before individual progress can be made. 39. Why us? Why like this? What is a nice being like you doing in a place like this? Why didn't AUM evolve the concept of hyperbolic 5D space-time for us to live, experience, in, or perhaps something else even stranger? Because 3D is simpler, and works better for the consciousness interactions and evolutionary possibilities AUM is exploring. If AUM wanted to explore or evolve a hyperbolic 5D reality or something else equally beyond our comprehension, it would merely dedicate a group of specialized reality cells to do just that. They would make up the weird part of AUM, instead of the comfy space-time part we know and love. That weird reality would not be directly relevant to us, nor we to it. Each would exist within its separate dimension, its own section of memory, of AUM thought space, in the same way that multiple space-time PMRs exist within different dimensions. Multiple realities, each in their own dimension, are roughly analogous to one of our big mainframe computers running multiple similar and dissimilar simulations at the same time. We do that all the time and it is no big deal. Each independent simulation has its own memory space and rule set, and is driven by its own time loop. It is reasonable to expect there are many ongoing parallel experiments to determine the most profitable set of constraints in order to design the most effective learning labs. The fundamental process working upon ACJM would eventually discover which subrealities, rule sets, or types of space were most functional, and which were most profitable. Additionally, AUM, in its effort to facilitate the fundamental process in optimizing 3D spacetime, would need to assemble a broad assortment of 3D implementations in order to provide good statistical sampling. 328 I my big toe I why us? Why like this? Across a variety of 3D results. It would be risky and very bad science for AUM to base its conclusions about our profitability of 3D space solely on our PMR performance. That may explain why I have run into many PMR-like subrealities during my explorations of the larger reality. Some appear to utilize a space-time that is our own, while others operate under rule sets that are obviously quite different from ours. The variety of life forms, habitats, and real ity dimensions within just NPMRN is immense. Where there are few inhibiting constraints, the fundamental process produces great diversity. Evolution explores all significant options within reach, but progresses and maintains only those that are profitable. AUM must be getting a significant return on its investment in 3D. How do I know? Because we, and many others, are here. Evolution doesn't mourn the victims, failed experiments, of its relentless pursuit of profit. If we are here, we are profitable. Or at worst, the profitability of the process of which we are a part has not yet been determined. NPMR is in one part, dimension, of AUM, while the NPMR11 are in another and the PMRK are in yet another, the space-time part. Dimension within dimension within dimension. Here NPMRN is one specific member of the set NPMR11, where n equals 1, 2, 3, n plus l, n plus 2, and our beloved PMR is one specific member of the set PMRD, where k equals 1, 2, 3. PMR, as a 3D space-time reality, must follow the rules of our particular space. Time, consequently, everything within our physical universe must behave and evolve within the constraints, physical causality, defined by our rule set. For example, the evolution of our universe, galaxy, and solar system, and the biological evolution upon Earth, all obey the same set of rules. Other PMR-Li.Ke realities may follow their own rule sets in their own version of space-time. There is no requirement for them to follow the same rule set, have the same physics. Likewise, the evolution in NPMR follows its own less resurrective causality and obeys its own unique set of rules. As is confirmed by my experience, one would expect the less constrained NPIVIRs to evolve a more varied set of life forms than the more constrained PMRs. Though you might think that the beings and critters in NPMR are merely thought forms, whereas the beings and critters in PMR are real life forms, I will demonstrate in section 4 that the difference is only apparent, that the distinction between physical and non-physical is relative to an observer's perspective. The observer's perspective is a function of the constraints and rule sets that define his interaction with, and perception of, his local virtual reality. You will see that the so-called real-life forms in PMR are actually thought forms within AUM as well. Book 2, Section 3, Chapter 39 I 329. The overall purpose of AUM trickles down to our overall purpose. The nature of AUM likewise trickles down to our nature. Our local reality and everything in it is a product of consciousness evolution. We operate within our niche on the edge of an enormous consciousness ecosystem. We are individually derived by limiting and constraining a subset of AUM's consciousness. Just as our body is constructed of biological EEL.ls, our conscious awareness, at its most fundamental level, is constructed of an individuated or bounded group of reality cells constrained to perceive a specific set of causally related events. Our awareness within PMR reflects the interaction between individuated groups of reality cells that have been constrained by the space-time rule set. The being we call ourselves, lump in the AUM sheet, is not dependent on our physical body, it is the other way around. Physical bodies are relatively dense space-time constrained experience bumps on the lumps in the sheet. These self-perpetuating, low-maintenance, biological matter experience bumps come with a sensor platform called a body to provide experience and immediate feedback, a low-end free will awareness unit, FWAU, and a lifetime guarantee. All such biological matter bumps are designed to make choices, assess the feedback, and apply the fundamental process toward the evolution of both body and consciousness. Yes, critters have consciousness and free will too. Theirs is simply more limited and less individuated than ours. Let's contemplate designing an experiment in bump consciousness. We should use a simple self-replicating design that can evolve its own forms. It would be better to give it limited awareness and functionality so it won't be continually getting stuck in intellectual inkless loops thinking about interactions instead of experiencing them, as did some of the less productive experiments AUM tried earlier. The FWAU, how it works, why its invention was a logical necessity is discussed in section 4, while more about experiments AUM tried earlier is included in sections 4 and 5. These individuated consciousness experience bumps must be self-modifying. They must be capable of learning, of self-improvement through multiple evaluative feedback loops. Because these bump beings are very limited, they must be designed to accumulate knowledge and evolutionary progress by being recycled again and again through many challenging interactions until the FWAU self-destructs or eventually ripens for harvesting. The uniqueness and personal integrity, identity, of each FWAU is maintained in support of accumulative accelerating growth potential. A few people who are unfamiliar with the nomenclature on AUM's design. 330 I my big toe I why us? Why like this? Drawings call the FWAU a soul, spirit, or simply the non-physical component. Are you implying that critters have souls too? One might ask. Sure, why not? They are constructs of consciousness like the rest of us. Because Th6 our awareness is even dimmer than ours, the degrees of free DOM available to their consciousness for spiritual growth are also much more restricted. It is the same idea fundamentally, but with a considerably different implementation. Their non-physical component is less unique, structured, and interactive than ours. However, do not think that critters are inferior simply because they are different. The proclivity to reinterpret our differences as obvious superiority represents little picture arrogance. Every critter, including you, has its point and its place. Diversity is a natural artifact of evolution when there are few constraints. Each type of entity reflects unique potential, capacity, goals, purpose, and responsibility, yet all spring from the same source and follow the same processes. One might say that they occupy different niches and habitats within the same consciousness evolution fractal ecosystem. The fewer constraints that limit a particular consciousness, the lower its associated local entropy can go, and the more effective and powerful it can become. We will discuss the concept of the entropy of consciousness more fully in Chapter 13 of this book. We humans are essentially a different type of critter, as are all sentient entities. No matter how you believe we ended up here, from simple evolution making the most of random events, to a rogue planet in a highly elliptical orbit, to UFOs, to a mystical eruption, at the root, all physical processes and entities are derived from the same source. Our existence lies at the feet of an evolving AUM consciousness system. Only superficial physical details differentiate between the many theories of how mankind arrived on Earth. In the big picture, the physical details are not particularly important. 40. A chip off the old block. Because your questions have been accumulating for some time, I will make an attempt to answer a few of them before we go further. I wouldn't want you to pop with frustration like a giant festering intellectual zit. Oh, ugh, sorry about that, but the image is too much fun and metaphorically accurate to throw it out merely because it is insulting, nasty, and distasteful. You are having fun, aren't you? Do not forget about questions that come up, write them down as they occur to you, and if they have not been a 11th word by the end of section 6, they will serve wonderfully as the initial goals of discovery for your personal truth quest that will surely follow. I am guessing that at Ravo's point the most common of your questions can be sorted into 5 loosely related areas of general interest. It is the thought that counts. Man, and other beings both physical and non-physical, as well as all the extant objects found here, there, and avec one where, may be described loosely as thought forms created within consciousness. It should not be too surprising that within AUM, or in M.I.Nd space, the intent, or will of the mind becomes the fundamental or natural force. You will soon see, in the next section, that thought forms are as real as rocks, and that every real thing is a manifestation of consciousness regardless of how dimly it might reflect that seminal awareness, yes, minerals included. AUM is fundamental, we are derivative. We exhibit the properties of the sheet is not defined by the characteristics of the puppets. The puppets are of the sheet you, not of the puppets. NPMR 332 I my big toe I a chip off the old block. PMR, are sensor platforms, bodies, and FWAUs, souls, are algae constructs of evolved digital awareness that we call consciousness. Our intent, focused mental energy, specifically directs and orders a portion of that same consciousness, just as AUM's intent does, except ours is typically dim, unfocused, and of low power. Spiritual growth, developing a higher quality, lower entropy consciousness, provides for more brightness, capability, effective organization, and more energy to do work, in other words, more personal power. Let's take a short pause to examine the dynamics of intent and the manipulation of non-physical energy, and to see how both are connected to consciousness. This will be a first, quick glimpse. The subject will be covered in more detail later. In mind space, thoughts are the results of an active awareness exercising intent or will. They are objects. They constitute entities, discrete units of organized content within digital memory, that are individuated manifestations of consciousness energy. These mental content packets, sometimes called thought objects or thought forms, may be acted upon, energy may be added or extracted, leaving the content modified. They may exchange energy with each other according to the particular rule set under which they operate. If this concept seems difficult to grasp, consider the various players and characters, interactive objects, within a complex interactive computer simulation game to be analogous to thought forms. Within the digital consciousness of AUM, thought forms have a life energy of their own, and are perceived to have a bounded extent, not physical volume, in thought space. That individual defining boundary functions similarly to a body. The apparent body or form of a non-physical, from the PMR perspective, individuated consciousness object or entity is dependent on the perceiver, closest match or best representation in the perceiver's database of objects, and on what the non-physical consciousness object projects, something analogous to a personal web page that defines the individual, easily changeable by those who know how. Their apparent form is an expression or manifestation of their content. Because thought forms have energy, organized content and operational capabilities, they can interact and have effects. The discrete energy packets they exchange have the effect of modifying digital content. Digital energy has the ability to add, delete, modify, or arrange bits. When a digital system decreases its entropy, it modifies its bits in ways that are more functionally useful. A digital potential has the ability to set and effectively order bits. In addition to interactive computer game characters and environments, intelligent agents or software automatons may offer a rough analogy to some of the less complex non-physical, virtual, entities, non-physical only from the point of view of PMR. However, some thought forms may have enough complexity, processing power, and Book 2, Section 3, Chapter 40 I 333. Memory associated with them to execute their own defining programming, implement conditionals, make choices, develop their own databases and become self-modifying. Some, given sufficient capability and the proper environments, may eventually exhibit a limited dim awareness that can evolve toward brighter awareness, following in AUM's footsteps. Thus we have individual thought objects, which function as subprograms within an immense digital mind, evolving into all manner and type of consciousness entities, some of which may be dimly self-aware and capable of developing independent intent. What a marvelously convoluted process! It reminds me of how a simple geometrical set can be recursively repeated and applied at various scales, one level building upon the other, until the totality of these piggybacking patterns produces an amazing fractal image. A big picture manifestation of a small rule set and simple process. Contemplate evolution iteratively operating upon consciousness to create complex patterns of evolving entities, environments, and dimensions. Can you imagine an iterative application of the fundamental process operating upon the digital media of consciousness to produce diversely populated realities at various levels and scales piggybacked one upon the other? Such self-perpetuating, self-defining dynamic structure would best be described as a consciousness evolution fractal. Consciousness evolution, process and content recursively repeated and applied at every profitable scale, one level building upon the other, until the totality jointly produces a big picture if all that is. To summarize, conscious intent can create and manipulate thought forms by generating or modifying the thought forms defining content within a subset of memory. True to the typical recursive nature of evolving systems, a consciousness exercising intent has the ability to manipulate the consciousness energy, digital organization, of which itself and others are composed. This fact allows an individuated consciousness to create thought forms and to affect other consciousnesses and thought forms directly through an intent-driven exchange of digital energy and organizational content. Energy is normally defined as the ability or capacity to do work, to effect a change. Digital energy has the ability to change digital content and modify digital structure. In other words, digital energy has the ability to rearrange bits, to organize and reorganize, to increase or decrease entropy and synergy within a system. A system has potential digital energy if it has the potential to be organized or structured more profitably, that is, structured in such a way as to reduce its average entropy. Consciousness represents a self-modifying system that applies the fundamental process to lower its average entropy. Consciousness is energy, digital energy, the energy of organization. In terms of energy conservation, the digital potential energy plus synergy of a conscious digital system of fixed capacity remains constant. Here synergy is inversely related to entropy. Synergy equals constant/entropy. As a system with a fixed digital capacity increases its synergy, its potential energy decreases by an equal amount. 334 my big TOE chip off the old block. AUO began as digital potential energy and evolved into AUM by lowering its entropy, increasing its synergy, as the fundamental process optimized its relationship with its environments. Everyone knows that growing up, evolving, or increasing the quality of one's consciousness quality is hard work. A self-modifiable system must perform work to decrease its average entropy or increase its average synergy. More precisely, the profitable work done by the system is proportional to the increase in its synergy or, equivalently, is inversely proportional to its change in its entropy. Spiritual growth is the natural work of consciousness systems. The energy that a given individuated conscious entity can apply to other products of consciousness by focusing its intent is dependent upon its entropy. High entropy consciousness has little power to affect anything outside itself. In contrast, a low entropy consciousness can perform miracles, from the perspective of PMR, that sends psi researchers scurrying for their notebooks. What does entropy and synergy have to do with us? The body is a virtual extension of the soul, or equivalently, the body is a virtual extension of an individuated, constrained, unit of consciousness. From TL1 EPMR view, consciousness is the non-physical energy of a self-organizing digital system. It is the energy of profitable organization. The soul, as an individuated unit of consciousness, is a subset of the larger consciousness, a constrained portion of non-physical energy that contains enough memory and processing capability to support self-optimization through profitable intentional choice or free WI.LL. Your body is actually a virtual body, an experience of consciousness made apparently physical by constraining all interactions of the individuated limited awareness and experience to only those allowed by the space-time rule set. Detailed explanations will be found in section 4. NPMR has evolved more varied life forms than PMR because of fewer constraints. Are you beginning to gel the picture of what your reality is like and how it works? It becoming apparent that consciousness is the media of your individuated existence that has been molded into specific function and content by the profitable requirements of evolution? It would seem natural, because we are part and parcel of AUM's being, that our minds are chips off the old block, so to speak, and thus able to communicate over the reality wide web. The RWW constitutes the master network of all consciousness, using individual consciousness intent protocol, ISUP/RWW.individuatedconsciousness.npmr. Everything in existence is connected because it is evolving as part of one source, one continuous n-dimensional sheet, one substance, one media, one fractal. One big picture, one consciousness, AUM. Book 2, Section 3, Chapter 40 I 335. Why can't we get our story straight? My experience and the experience of many NPL/LLR explorers throughout history indicate that the most fundamental communication mechanism within NPMR uses thought packets, entire thoughts or paragraphs of meaning as opposed to sequences of symbols such as lures or words. We call this process telepathic. The receiver may subsequently translate these thoughts into words according to his or her experience, what currently exists in the receiver's active memory database. That is why two people having the same experience or getting the same message in NPMR may report it differently. Assuming that both had crystal clear low noise RVW connections and received the message accurately, that same message will be absorbed and perceived differently. It will mean different things to each. The two reporters will not only have different interpretations, but also different expressions as well. The same thing happens in PMR. It is well documented that 5 individuals, all standing on the same street corner witnessing the same accident, will produce 5 different accounts of what happened. Given the personal nature of experience and the common fact that some static or noise is usually on the line, there is, it seems, always less than a perfectly clear and distorted attentive perception, and given the differences in expression and interpretation that come with various educations, cultures, and belief systems, it is no wonder there is often more confusion than clarity when comparing accounts of a single event. For another example, consider one speaker and 3 reporters, all equally bright. The speaker is highly educated, PhD in classical literacy U1E. One reporter has a PhD in mechanical engineering, another has a BA in English, while the last is entirely illiterate, but speaks well. The subject is a comparison of the symbolism used by James Joyce and Homer. After the speaker makes his presentation to the 3 reporters, you are to individually interview each of the reporters and reconstruct, to the best of your ability, the content the speaker was trying to communicate. You would like to know exactly what was said. You are allowed no outside information about the subject or about the reponents. The reporters do not know each other and will divulge nothing about themselves. Notice that your own education and knowledge of the subject is one of the most critical variables. Do you see the problems that exist in reconstructing information that has been inadvertently and unavoidably filtered by individual memory, capability, and understanding? The reporting of paranormal communications to an investigator is no different. 336 My big TOE chip off the old block. Thus, the seeming unreliability and discrepancy between individuals receiving either normal or paranormal communications is often due to the fundamental uniqueness of each individual, including the speaker. There could be a poor connection, difficult to understand, don't use the same metaphors or vocabulary, or the message itself may be communicate from an unfamiliar one perspective, like classical literature. Communicating with another is inherently difficult. Successful communication is easiest with your identical twin, and most difficult with someone from a different reality. This is a personal evolutionary journey and a group effort cannot replace your individual effort. Your experience is a combination of what you perceive through your limited senses and how you interpret those perceptions. Interpretation is based on your previous experiences and the quality of your consciousness as well as your understanding of little truth and big truth. If your perception or interpretation is noisy, wrong, or significantly incomplete, your conclusions will be inaccurate. That is why a careful scientific results-oriented approach is required. As said before, the proof of the subjective pudding is in the objective tasting. Yes, the tasting must be objective, absolutely. Perhaps a simplified example will help explain why paranormal information is often vague and unreliable. Precognitive experiences, including precognitive dreams, are a relatively common human experience. To understand how and why they sometimes occur, let's consider the volcanic model of mental awareness as developed by the theory of mind tectonics. At a deep level, your intuition is awash in molten paranormal information. It is connected directly to the one source and is online at the RWW Probable Realities homepage. However, before these data can burst into YOM normal everyday consciousness, they must rise to the surface where your PMR awareness lies. Most of the time there is no content lit to the surface, or means to express the largely undifferentiated molten content of your intuition in PMR terms that make good acceptable causal sense to your belief-limited, rational, PMR awareness. Thus, with no viable outjet, the information remains submerged deep within the intuition. However, occasionally a crack or fissure may develop in the rational mantle, belief bedrock, and experience crust, which enables the information magma to spew forth at the surface of PMR awareness. Such spontaneous venting is typically the result of internal pressures proportional to the precognitive event's personal significance. Fissures typically occur near consciousness fault lines, which are often created by the collision of massive belief plates that contradict each other. http://www.my-big-toe.com L. Book 2, Section 3, Chapter 40 I 337. In the vicinity of most major fault lines, opposing tectonic forces generate skepticism that noticeably swells the mental landscape's allowable possibilities. Additionally, the heat generated by the friction between the COL lighting plates sometimes produces an increased porosity in the belief bedrock that allows open-mindedness R.O. percolate slowly toward the surface. If enough open-mindedness percolates into the swollen bulges of expanded mind space, the resultant mind tremors and mind quakes, as measured on the Eureka scale, become the precursor of future precognitive or other psi activity. The fissure through which the psi magma flows is created by some word, name, relationship, event, consen 1, or experience in the PMR-MEM bank that may have a symbolic, direct, or indirect connection to a particular portion of the paranormal content buried deep in the intuition. This crack in the causal conformity of the mind's self-imposed boundaries may produce an indirect path for the magma, creating turbulence and mixing of the information as it flows, or it could produce, though less likely, a straight shot to the surface with a clear message delivered intact. A connection that somehow forges a link between some discrete person ally significant data in the intuition and the belief, ego, and fear-limited PMR awareness, whether vague or straightforward, can serve as a crack that allows subterranean paranormal information to find a means of expression above the surface. Only if your intuition finds a way to vent its content to the surface will you experience a psi event such as precognition, and then only if you are paying attention. 1L1E crack between your deeper consciousness and the surface of PMR awareness must establish an adequate, continuous, but not necessarily straightforward, connection of SORN type before the information magma can find an acceptable way to express itself within your conscious awareness. More often than not, these fissures, the intuition to PJVIR awareness connections, have only enough of the necessary understanding, symbols, and feelings 1.0 enable such an expression to occur, if there is enough pressure, but not enough to rend the content of that expression clearly. Most precognition occurs in the margins, like a hot spring, or unpredictable geyser. As a result, we experience fuzzy, difficult to interpret, precognitive moments that seem to come and go by their own volition. Of 5 stresses, pressures, and personal significance constantly fluctuates and changes. Meditation enables you to enlarge the cracks systematically, which eventually lead to the development of broad and reliable avenues for intuitive expression. These in WRN enable you to attain a free-flowing clarity. http://www.my-big-toe.com I 338 My big toe I chip off the old block. In interpreting and expressing the bigger picture. Many people, perhaps a majority, have precognitive experiences from time to time, especially if they have a higher quality of consciousness. A low quality of consciousness is thick, dense, and non-porous. It rarely permits meaningful leaks of intuition. Precognitive experience is personal. JT does not transfer well to those who do not understand or share such a connection with their intuition. The real significance of a psi experience is the benefit it offers to the person who experiences it. Its value, impact, and purpose are not focused outwardly, though the paranormal information received is most likely to be about others. Such an experience is primarily an opportunity for its originator. Though open-minded skepticism represents the only logical, valid approach to exploring the unknown, it is a fact of Western culture that open-mindedness toward the concept of a larger reality is much more likely to have resulted from a personal psi experience than from the theory of valid approaches to new knowledge or from a commitment to logical methodology. The concept that communications are telepathic, via thought packet 5 within AUM's digital mind space, and that action is initiated by our conscious intent will seem more obvious and reasonable later. Additionally, a discussion in Section 4 of the mechanics that enable us to share common consciousness and be part of common mind will also shed some light on this area. For now, you may consider thought packets as discrete energetic patterns of content propagated through and by reality cells from one individuated consciousness to another. If that seems confusing, think about how information is passed around inside a complex computer simulation. Recall how the data from one subroutine can dramatically affect the operation of another subroutine and how all of us interactively transfer data packets across the internet. Information transfer often leaves both the sender and the receiver in a slightly changed state. Digital energy has the capability to modify content. Information or content you transfer represents an energy transfer. Rearranging bits within a digital system into a more profitable configuration displays the work of evolution and changes the system's energy state. Other dimensions. The concept of dimension is not as strange or difficult to understand as it first seems. Thoughts, ideas, or mental constructs that are held by AUM, in memory, define individuated existence and the dimensions, interaction boundaries, of that existence. One way to think of dimension. http://www.my8igto.com Book 2, Section 3, Chapter 40 I 339. Is that it represents constraints on the allowable interaction between independent reality systems, similar to divider in a notebook, a wall between rooms, or the glass between petri dishes. Do not fall into an anthropomorphic trap and imagine AUM to be a sentient being thinking thoughts as we do, scratching its ethereal head and wondering, where do I want to go today? AUJBL is an evolved mind-thing being system that we cannot objectively understand because we are limited beings with minds that are only partially aware and partially used. The idea that an awareness constrained to physical perceptions within a virtual space-time physical reality would find it difficult to perceive its roots in a non-physical superset of its existence should be easy for you to understand. Dimension can be seen as a separate memory or calculation space within Digital mind or as a practical separator between reality.es with different rule sets. Dimensional separators are often porous. To understand why, we can look at our own multidimensional nature. A more accurate description of space-time-based humanoids is that they are individuated units of conscious awareness who constrain a portion of their consciousness to a sense-limited 3D experiential physical reality. We can, through the doorway of our subjective mind, learn to transcend the barriers of dimension. Being aware and operant in multiple dimensions is what allows the big picture to come into sharp focus through first-hand experience. Exploring the multidimensional properties of your consciousness enables you to examine AUM and the nature of your real JD scientifically from the inside, rather than hypothetically, from the outside. Thus, you can see how important it is that you do not allow your ignorance, fear, and belief to shut off this incredibly important pathway to a greater understanding. We speak of the Sapanya parts of ADM constituting dimension only because we are spatially oriented 3D beings. You must realize that these pans are in mind space or consciousness space and not physical space, they are not location specific. We are not speaking of geometric 0-1 spatial dimension here. Dimension is nothing more than a subset of AUM's mind space, a compartmentalized memory and calculation space, or a bounded subset of organized digital functionality, content, capability, and purpose sharing a given rule set. For example, If you are thinking of three things simultaneously, perhaps dealing with three independent analytical issues, each is in its own dimension in thought space. It would appear that you are also a generator of multiple dimensions. However, your memory and the power and clarity of your mind are, relatively speaking, as dim as a nano light bulb, nothing personal. 340 my big TOE chip off the old block. How many times can AUM fold the cognitive sheet? How many apparently independent sections of sheet can AUM play puppets with at the same time? How many sheets with one in sheets within SHL can there be? We will begin to answer these questions below and TL1 and again more precisely in section 5. First, let's see how reality is organized. Take me to your leader. Randomness in real processes typically generates high entropy and low productivity. The fundamental process, for example, is not a random process. It represents a precise methodology for assessing the possibilities and determining the most profitable states for a self-configuring system. In general, order and organization reduce chaos, and rules define order. AUM can and does set up, has evolved, rules, WAS to police and enforce those rules, and ways low encourage the more useful and productive evolutionary experiments that are ongoing within itself to achieve their goal of great.er. Profitability through self-improvement. You may be wondering why AUM must police the activity of its own parts bido asn't AUM simply enforce its will and have it its way or no way like a Burger King customer with an attitude. Isn't AUM the boss? Questions such as these indicate that limited anthropomorphic concepts may be blocking the asker's view. AUM is not merely a smarter monkey with a good imagination, living in a big house. As evolving systems, software, hardware, political, social, biological, technological, organizational, or consciousness, become complex with set modifying feedback interactions popping up everywhere, they need to regulate, police, themselves. They evolve structure, rules, leaders, bosses, evaluators, judges, and social workers. The fun